Okay, are we ready over there for recording? Okay. It is now 7 p.m. and I'm reconvening to open session and calling to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Indian Prairie School District 204 on Monday, February 24th, 2025. Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Karubis.
Here.
Ms. Gintz.
Here.
Mr. Rising.
Here.
Ms. Fosdick.
Here.
Ms. Deming.
Present.
Ms. Donahue.
Here.
And Ms. Jane.
Here. Ms. Jane, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next regular board meeting will be held on Monday, March 10th. We now have a public hearing. It's now 7:01, and I'm calling to order the public hearing for the amended budget.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education.
I don't think that's on.
All right. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Tonight is the final step in adopting an amended budget for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Administration is recommending the adoption of an amended budget to reflect the successful November 2024 referendum. We believe adopting an amended budget demonstrates, with maximum transparency, the impact of the referendum on the budget for the district. As outlined at the January 13th Board of Education meeting, where the amended budget was initially presented, there are no changes to the operating budget for the 24-25 school year. The successful referendum was for capital needs and thus only impacts the non-operating capital projects and debt service funds. The primary amendment was to the capital projects fund, which had capital expenditures initially budgeted for $13 million. We are now budgeting $26 million for capital expenditures for this fiscal year, obviously doubling the amount of capital work we plan to do this fiscal year. This reflects the portion of referendum capital work that will be completed by June 30th of 2025. A significant amount of that work will be done over the summer, but I am proud to report we are already starting a lot of that hard work now. The Capital Projects Fund budget also now includes the proceeds from the initial bond sale that was completed in December of 2024. That brought in initial proceeds of just under $15 million. All these proceeds will be used and are restricted for capital projects, whether they completed in this fiscal year or the next fiscal year. The debt service fund is the fund that will repay the bonds, and as the first payment of the bonds are not due until after June 30th, there was no amendment necessary to these expenditures. Consistent with our message from the referendum will not increase the tax rate paid towards bond and interest. This is also reflected in the amended budget. Administration has now incorporated the successful referendum into our forecast for future periods, and that includes the 5-year forecast presentation scheduled for later this evening. As such, we do not believe we will need amended budgets in the future as a result of the referendum. Consistent with requirements of the State Board of Education, the budget was posted on the district's website for 30 days, and a public notice was published in the Naperville Sun newspaper noting tonight's public hearing. The business office has not received any public feedback on the budget, and as such, tonight's amended budget is presented with the recommendation that is adopted later this evening. I'm now open for any questions or for the next steps in the public hearing.
So we had no public comment signed up to speak on the amended budget. So I will move to, I need a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fosdick.
Yes.
Ms. Gintz.
Yes.
Mr. Karubis.
Yes.
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Deming.
Aye.
And Ms. Jane.
Yes.
The motion passes to close the public hearing. So now we have 7 board salutes. We'll start with Ms. Fosdick.
All right. Illinois Music Education Association All-State Music Festival. The board salutes the 68 District 204 high school student musicians who were selected by the Illinois Music Education Association to perform at the All-State Music Festival in Peoria. Indian Prairie annually places at the top of school districts statewide in the number of student musicians selected for this conference. This year, District 204 had students participating in the All-State Choir, Orchestra, Band, Jazz Band, Composition Track, and Future Music Educator Seminar. Congratulations to our All-State music students and their teachers.
Ms. Jane.
Granger Middle School student wins DuPage County Regional Spelling Bee. The board salutes Shruti Ayagari, a 7th grader at Granger Middle School, for winning the DuPage County Regional Spelling Bee and advancing to the National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C. this May. We also recognize Granger Middle School 8th grader Dhruv Kaligotla as a runner-up and the Still Middle School 6th grader Aparna Sarkar for finishing in the top 10. Congratulations to all.
Do you have a second one or just one? Okay. Ms. Gentz?
I do have 2. Naperville Public Works Snowplow Challenge. The board salutes District 204 students for winning the Name Your Naperville Public Works Snowplow Challenge. The winning schools and their snowplow names are Brookdale Elementary School with Frosty the Snowplow, Clow Elementary School with Scoop I Did It Again, Fry Elementary School with Blizzard of Oz, May Watts Elementary School with Chili Watson, and Patterson Elementary School with Seymour Snow. Congratulations to all the students involved in this fun event. District 204 students earn Microsoft User Specialist certification. The board salutes the Mattia Valley Business Department for the success of 44 students who earned their Microsoft User Specialist certification in Microsoft Excel during the first semester. This certification validates their skills and prepares them for success in the workplace, boosting their confidence and career opportunities. Congratulations to the students and business department for their achievements.
Mr. Karubis.
Neuqua Valley students win top honors at Silent Film Festival. The board salutes Neuqua Valley media students for winning top honors at the Student Silent Film Festival. Their film, Friend Zone, earned both the Outstanding Achievement in Cinema Award and the Audience Choice Award. Neuqua Valley was one of 11 high schools participating in the competition. Congrats to all.
Ms. Deming.
Neuqua Valley teacher named as Golden Apple Award finalist. The board salutes Neuqua Valley English teacher Jillian Schneider for being named a 2025 Golden Apple Awards finalist for excellence in teaching. She is just one of 30 teachers in Illinois being recognized for her dedication to students and her innovative approach to teaching writing and literature. Winners of the 2025 Golden Apple Award will be announced in the spring. Congratulations, Ms. Schneider, on this well-deserved honor.
Mr. Rising.
Illinois State Board of Education, those who excel, and Teacher of the Year and Service Awards. The board salutes several educators and community members for their outstanding achievements in the 2025 Illinois State Board of Education, those who excel, and Teacher of the Year awards. Congratulations to Christina Min, Claire Johnson, and Sharicia Holmes from Georgetown Elementary for receiving an award of special recognition. We also recognize Laura Rees from McCarty Elementary and Sydney Polk from Brooks Elementary for earning an award of excellence. A special thank you to Jillian Gibson, District 204 parent, who is also being honored with the Community Volunteer Award of Meritorious Service. This educator recognition program acknowledges and appreciates Illinois' amazing teachers, administrators, support staff, and community members who make a positive impact in their schools. Congratulations to all.
So let's have a round of applause for these amazing accomplishments. Next, we'll have our student representative report by Ben Gula from Neuqua Valley High School.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Ben Gula, and I'm the school board representative for Neuqua Valley High School. To update you, the first 2 months of this new year has been a major success for Neuqua Valley students and teachers. First, February plays a major role in student performance events, such as our annual orchestra showcase and variety show. Each of these events are a major opportunity to provide our students a showcase for their unique talents. Tomorrow, our student council will be hosting one of our favorite Neuqua traditions, Mr. NVHS. Ultimately, based off of hot seat interviews, creative outfits, and unique talents, a senior candidate will be crowned the title of Mr. NVHS. Audience members have the opportunity to bring a full-size toiletry item to vote for their favorite contestant. We hope to see you there. Moving on, many of our sports team and extracurricular activities have seen many successes recently. First, we would like to recognize our varsity cheer team for placing 3rd at state. Their hard work and dedication throughout the year provided them with a well-deserved spot on the podium. Next, our boys swim and dive team got 1st place at DVC and did great at sectionals. Additionally, our chess team and speech team placed top 10 at state, showing that they both have a lot of hard work and dedication. Next, I would like to congratulate 2 teachers whose hard work and dedication to teaching has gotten them to be recognized. First, Ms. Jillian Schneider, a teacher in our English department, has qualified as a Golden Apple finalist, which honors outstanding teachers and leaders. Second, Mr. Jim Fox has won the award for Distinguished Mathematics Teaching, recognized by the Mathematical Association of America. We are so grateful to have these talented educators, and the impact they have on our students is truly amazing. Looking into the future, we have many events and opportunities planned for our students. This Wednesday, we'll be holding a college admissions panel to help our students plan out their future. We will also be having our annual monologue show on March 7th and 8th, where students get to perform and act out their own writings. Our student council is introducing a new event called Lucky to Be a Wildcat, where they hold unique Spirit Week events and activities during the week of March 17th. Our Fine Arts Department will be having our NVSO concert on March 18th to hear our talented musicians. And lastly, we'll be having our first major senior event, which is our Indian Prairie Scholars Induction Ceremony, where we recognize the hard work of seniors who have met a specific GPA requirement. As we start to transition into the final months of our school year, we aim to provide the best resources and events to truly end the year off on a good note. Overall, Neuqua has been kicking off the new year on a great note, and we hope to keep the momentum going. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Next, we have our school spotlight with Steck Elementary today, presented by Dr. Elizabeth Pullman, Ms. Dee Batchelor, and Mrs. Nancy Fitster.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Pullman. I'm proud to be the principal of Steck Elementary School. I'd like to thank you for having us visit you tonight. It's my honor to introduce 2 fabulous teachers at Steck that are here to spotlight our work with SAM Labs and all that it has done for our students and our community. So I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Danielle D. Batchelder and Mrs. Nancy Pfister.
We are honored to be here this evening. Dee and I couldn't be more proud to represent Steck and discuss and spotlight. We're going to do this in 5 minutes, the best that we can. If you look at your, today you have a kit right in front of you, so you can see all the kits that the children receive from K through 5. We're going to go quickly, so we're going to start out with what is SAM Labs. And SAM Labs is a learning tool that helps students explore STEM by building projects with simple coding, connecting motors, lights, sensors to see how their coding works, and it is also letting them have hands-on activities. So the history and the goals of STEM started in 2022 when it was initially rolled out. We are currently in year 3, and hopefully in 2027 we will have full implementation in the elementary buildings. The best thing I feel about SAM Labs is it is absolutely the portrait of a graduate. The critical thinking, the resilience, the collaboration, the communication, those are already starting in the elementary school. So if you look at our Steck journey here in 2023, there were 3 teachers, you're looking at 2 of them right now, who were go-getters before school, being trained by two of the best, Liz Coletta and Laura Nyland, who spent our mornings with us. We knew right away it was going to be a love of children, and we jumped right on board and wanted to go for it. In 2023, the Sam sisters brought on Latia Johnson. The three of them have trained and co-taught, and believe it or not, D&I got everybody on in 2024 and 2025 in our building because we sold it. Some of the great things that we do, if you look at, this is a seasonal thing where this is a second grade class. They're coloring it, they're coating it with RGB lights, they have systems, they're pairing it, and you can see them right there, just the magical things of the cooperation of those kids working together.
I'm just so excited to be back before you talking about Sam Labs again. I don't have Graham with me this time, but I have some really fun things to kind of walk you through here. We strongly believe that intentional STEM integration enhances student engagement. We start with these low pressure opportunities for student teamwork, creativity, hands-on problem solving, and Sam Labs is a tool that kind of bridges the coding world to those real world applications that we're doing. If you take a look at this picture, students are looking at symmetry in nature. We collected leaves, made a little fall lantern, and then they coded some lights and motor sensors to kind of go with that and create a fall lantern. Another example is where students are collaborating to brainstorm, build, and debug projects. So in the winter time, we built these little gingerbread house lights. They designed them. We had up to 6 lights connected to each one. And students are learning from one another while gaining valuable experience. The big thing is they're presenting and explaining their creations. And so we're fostering that confidence and communication ability in young students.
Once we've taught all of the beginning lessons, we then have started to integrate it into our science lessons. And so if you can look at the science integration we did with sea turtles, in second grade we do habitats. Last year I did a whole week long with my team who jumped on board with me, and we did reading, integrating writing, integrating LMC with the lock boxes, and then we ended it with the Sam sisters coming, Dr. Talley, thank you for coming, Dr. Lee came. We looked at how the light, the sun and the light and the turtles travel through the water, and we spent that whole week looking at it. And if you look at that picture there, you can see how we made the ocean and how we made the sunlight and how the kids are working together. So the whole week long, we talked about sea turtles and tied it into our science unit.
Sam Labs elevates learning. It challenges students' thinking and encourages creative problem solving. It's hands-on, and we're exploring multiple solutions, which is huge with kids, debugging and designing interactive models. Here in this picture, Miss Jane, you were actually in our room the day that we were trying to do this. Students coded weathered boards to change colors with seasons, and then also built a wind model, and then kind of had the windmill match the speed of the average seasonal temps. So when you think of the science content we're covering and the depth we're able to go, these kids make a difference. Sticking with science, your goal is for us to do 3 a year, and I've had the honor of doing all 3, so I'm gonna highlight one more. Sam Labs also deepens student understanding through creativity and experimentation. Designing interactive models bridges the art, creative design, coding, and we're nurturing that curiosity. We value our LMC. If you take a look, the students there with the bloxels, you know, like the tiny little designs, we're able to not only code it, but then take it through that multimodal learning that way. Something else I want to highlight in our building, we have buy-in because our teachers are empowered. The little badge you see there on the sign outside the classrooms that have done the 4 starter lessons, they're on display. So as you walk around the district, take a look and see what teachers are engaged that way. This part I'm really excited about. The opportunity that you've given me as an educator by having Liz and the role that she has lets me go into kind of my creative depths as well. With the new ELA curriculum, our inquiry project was how plants and animals work together to survive. So they were supposed to do a scrapbook and a little written entry. And we were like, well, what if we kind of integrate Sam Labs with it? And so students were given task cards where they could develop their own project. And there's a lot of problem solving that goes in when you have to work with someone else to create some sort of design. And we found that failure becomes learning opportunity. So the students here had ants and aphids, and they wanted the bug to move 180 degrees. And with the motor, it moves 360. And so we were able to reach out to Liz and say, hey, we're looking for a block that moves 180, students advocating for their learning. And she got us servo blocks. And so in the video of that, it's not live on your PDF slide, but the little legs move, and there's power in that when students are able to do that. Again, collective problem solving and perseverance. So in summary, we empower our students at Steck through personalized learning pathways. We allow them to take ownership of their learning, and there's value in that. We want to showcase our student achievements at the national level. The very first year we rolled this out with Liz, we had 3 teams tie for first place in a national design competition. Last year we had 2 sets of teams place second and third, where they're creating their own designs, submitting them, and winning. And again, there's value in that creativity. At Steck, we're committed to excellence and ensuring our classrooms evolve with the instructional technology that's out there and supporting others.
And so in elementary land, we love prizes. So you all have a blocky sticker so that you can remember the great things that are happening in our elementary world. You also have the Sam Sisters link. I would encourage you to see all the wonderful things on that link of all the opportunities. Because of them, the teamwork, the collaboration, that is why the teachers can strive and do this with children, because there are so many wonderful resources to use. And then there are 2 eagles on the board tonight. And there is one more. And those are to thank those 2 that have come already to our school to see our SAM Lab activities. And we encourage anyone else who would love to come to our school to see all the wonderful things that we are doing. And we're honored tonight that you would give us the time to share the great things that we do at Steck. So thank you.
One more shout out, we made those on our 3D printers. So thank you.
So thank you. That was wonderful and so exciting. Thank you. Good job, Nancy. So now we also have another very exciting agenda item tonight, a first for us, right? We haven't done this before. So we had a safety contest. Safe School Starts With Us, and we will have a presentation by Miss Lisa Berry and Officer Ron Wilkie.
We also like prizes. Good evening, Dr. Talley, President Donahue, and board members. Thank you for allowing us time this evening to present awards for the winners of our school safety contest. I'm joined by District 204 Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, Ron Wilkie, and we would like to welcome all the student finalists and their parents who are here tonight.
We'd also like to welcome Tony Burnsich, CEO of Rival 5 Technologies, and invite him to the front to help in distributing the prizes to our winners. We thank Rival 5 for their generous sponsorship of this program, which is allowing us to give away over $3,000 in prizes this evening.
We appreciate those who participated on our judging panel, which included members of local law enforcement, a representative from our sponsor, Rival 5, a representative from the Indian Prairie Parents Council, and our district safety, security, and emergency preparedness coordinator. We thank them for their time and effort in selecting the winners who will be awarded this evening.
So this is our first annual safety contest in which students were encouraged to create posters, digital designs, or video PSAs to raise awareness about the importance of preventing threats to our schools and fostering a safe learning environment. School safety is a shared responsibility, and it is crucial that students, staff, and the community work together to create a culture of awareness, vigilance, and action. By participating in this contest, students are not only showcasing their creativity, but also playing an active role in promoting safety and responsibility among their peers. Threats, whether real, hoaxes, or made as a joke, can have serious consequences, and raising awareness about reporting concerns to trusted adults or law enforcement is key to keeping our schools safe. We had over 200 students from preschool through high school participate in this contest. We also received entries from 26 of our 34 schools. This initiative underscores District 204's commitment to ensuring that every student feels secure, valued, and supported in their learning environment. We are proud to see our students using their voices to make a difference, and we look forward to continuing this important work together.
We will begin with awards for our elementary and early childhood level in which students submitted a drawing or a poster. When we call your name, please come to the front to receive your certificate and prize and stay at the front for a group photo that will be taken when all of the students in your level have been awarded. We have 3 honorable mention awards. Our first honorable mention, winning a $50 Amazon gift card, is a kindergarten student from Peterson Elementary. Madash, please come forward.
Come on up, buddy.
Oh, sure.
Our second honorable mention is a 3rd grade student from May Watts Elementary. Ananya, come on up. Fun fact about Ananya, she might have had a Mrs. Wilkie for a teacher last year, as I remember her, right? Yeah.
Our final honorable mention goes to 3rd grade student from Brooks Elementary, Sriyan.
Our 3rd place winner at the elementary and early childhood level, receiving a $100 Amazon gift card, is a 2nd grade student from Brookdale Elementary, Rajat.
Our 2nd place winner, receiving a $250 Amazon gift card, is a 5th grade student at Owen Elementary, Arnav.
And our 1st place winner at the elementary and early childhood level and receiving a $500 Amazon gift card is a 1st grade student from Kalasha Elementary. Aria, please come up to receive.
And we do have a brief video highlight of Aria's award, which we'll play now.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, I forgot. All right.
Hey, and if we could do a photo of all of our elementary students, and if parents want to take a photo as well, you're welcome to come up as well and take a picture of your children. Okay, moving on to the middle school level, students submitted both digital designs and video PSAs. Again, when we call your name, please come to the front to receive your certificate and prize, and stay at the front for a group photo after all the students have been awarded. We have 3 honorable mentions. Our first honorable mention winning a $50 Amazon gift card is a 6th grade student from Hill Middle School, Abigail.
Our second honorable mention is a 6th grade student from Granger Middle School. Girivar?
Our final honorable mention goes to a group of 8th grade students from Hill Middle School, Aditya, Daksh, Maxim, Dylan, and Rashil.
Our third place winner at the middle school level receiving a $100 Amazon gift card is a 6th grade student from Hill Middle School. Isabella, please come up for your award.
Our second place winner receiving a $250 Amazon gift card is a 7th grade student at Fisher Middle School, Evelyn.
And our first place winner at the middle school level and receiving a $500 Amazon gift card are 8th grade students from Hill Middle School, Dylan and Caden. Fortunately, Dylan and Caden are not here tonight to receive their award, but we have Dylan and Caden's video to view now.
Hey everyone. We all want to feel safe at school, right? But did you know each one of us has the power to make that happen? Threats in school can come in many forms. Real, fake, or even just a joke. And sometimes it can be hard to know what to do, but we can't ignore them. If you hear something, see something, or feel something's off, it's your responsibility to report it. No matter what kind of threat it is, real or a hoax, it's important to speak up. You never know. Your actions could prevent something serious from happening. If something serious does happen, report it to a trusted adult or even the police. It's always better to be safe than sorry. We all have an important role in keeping our schools safe. Remember, safe schools start with us. So speak up. Don't let fear or doubt keep you from doing the right thing. Together, we can keep our school a safe place for everyone. Let's do our part.
Okay, and we'll do another group photo.
Okay, okay, for sure, yeah.
Okay, and finally, we will award students at the high school level. Students submitted drawings and posters, digital designs, and video PSAs. When we call your name, please come to the front to receive your certificate and prize and stay at the front for a photo. We have 3 honorable mention awards. Our first honorable mention, winning a $50 Amazon gift card, is a senior at Waubonsee Valley High School, Andrea.
Our second honorable mention is a junior at Waubonsee Valley High School, Maria.
Our final honorable mention goes to a senior at Neuqua Valley High School, Kira.
Our third place winner at the high school level receiving a $100 Amazon gift card is a senior at Neuqua Valley High School, Sam.
Our second place winner receiving a $250 Amazon gift card is a freshman at Neuqua Valley High School, Alisa.
And our first place winner at the high school level and receiving a $500 Amazon gift card is a group of students from Waubonsee Valley High School. Michelle, Jackson, and William, please come up to accept your reward.
And we also have Michelle and Jackson's video to share now as well. We'll do a group photo. One more. Quick, wait. Congratulations again to all of our students who won awards during this year's safety contest. We would also like to acknowledge all the students who participated in the contest and the parents and teachers who supported our students in the process. We appreciate your partnership and recognition that safety of our schools is a shared responsibility and takes all of us working together.
We'd again like to thank Tony Burnsick and Rival 5 for their generous sponsorship of our first annual safety contest. We will be holding the safety contest again next year in conjunction with School Safety Week in October. Watch for information at the start of the school year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yay. That was wonderful. All right, it is now time for public comment, and 60 minutes is allowed. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups, and as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are this evening and keep comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from the board members during the meeting, but follow-up will be provided by an administrator as appropriate. Although this is not required, it is helpful for the board to know whether the comments and concerns we hear are being raised by residents. So we ask that you state if you live in the district and if you currently have children in our schools. We have one speaker tonight, Alicia Smith.
Hello, my name is Alicia Smith. I do live in the district. I live in the Gombert attendance area. I graduated from Waubonsie Valley High School and also attended Gregory Middle School. I taught at Georgetown Elementary School and Kendall Elementary School. And my niece and nephews attend Gombert Elementary School. 204 needs equity in having successful schools. 3 204 schools fall below the state average in state testing: Georgetown, Longwood, and McCarty. When the district designed the boundaries of Georgetown, it gave them a low-income population of 63%. That is more than triple the district average of 21%. Longwood's low-income population is 58%, which is almost triple the district average of 21%. Both are also higher than the state average. Then the district created even more inequity by having 3 of its schools with the highest low-income percentages feed into Fisher Middle School. School districts do not have to create inequitable schools that cannot meet the state testing averages. Naperville 203's low-income average is 18% compared to 204's 21%. Naperville 203 does not have a single school with a low-income average that is more than doubled the district average, let alone triple. As a result, every single school in Naperville 203 is well above the state average in state testing. A 2016 study found that in almost all major cities, Black and brown students are much more likely to attend schools where most of their peers are considered poor or low income. Researchers have found that the single most powerful predictor of racial gaps in educational achievement is the extent to which students attend schools surrounded by other low-income students. We should not be surprised at the racial gaps in the district or at Fisher Middle School when Black and brown students are in schools with high low-income percentages. The time is now to fix systemic equities in our educational system. The needs and rights of children cannot wait. For a kindergartner at Georgetown, McCarty, or Longwood, how many years of the same trend line? If the school board and administration are committed to equity, this segregation by income needs to be fixed. If Naperville 203 can make sure that all of its students are attending successful schools, why can't 204? We deserve to be included in the district's educational excellence. We want equitable schools for Georgetown, Longwood, and McCarty. All of this information is available on the Illinois School Report Card online. Go online to the Illinois School Report Card and then type in the school district or school to see the information. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We will start with the superintendent report. Dr. Talley.
Ms. Donahue, members of the Board of Education, Indian Prairie Community, last Friday, Mr. Jason Stipp, principal of Waubonsie Valley High School, was identified as the Illinois PTA Principal of the Year. We congratulate Mr. Stipp for his dedication and commitment to the students at Waubonsie Valley. The application for his nomination read in part, Jason Stipp is the principal everyone should have at least once during their school career because of his dedication to the students in his building. There is no doubt for anyone who has been in the halls of Waubonsie Valley High School in Aurora any time during the past 12 years that Jason's capacity for student well-being is his top priority. We are thankful for the PTA in submitting the nomination. Their partnership with the school and the district makes a world of difference. On Saturday, March 8th, we will have our third annual Mental Health Symposium. You can find information on our website about the symposium that will take place at Mattia Valley High School. There will be breakout sessions for both adults and children. We are pleased that Naperville 203, Wheaton-Warrenville District 200, East Aurora, West Aurora, and Oswego districts are working with us on this event. More than 300 people have signed up for the symposium already, so you still have time. Parents are asked to complete their school's 5 essential surveys. Survey results are an important part of the school improvement process. Data from the surveys help each school's administration understand what is going well in their school and where they can improve. For a school to receive results, however, a school must have 20% of its parents complete the surveys. You should have received information about the survey from your child's school, or you'll also have received it in our weekly email that was sent out on Wednesday. Surveys must be completed by March 31st. Finally, we have a request to name the auditorium at Waubonsee Valley High School after Mr. Dave Calvert, who retired from Waubonsee Valley in 2024 after 34 years of service to the school district and more specifically to Waubonsee. He taught English and film studies. He was also the Drama and Thespian Club sponsor for 25 years, and he directed over 120 main stage and musical productions. If anyone has cause for us moving forward with naming the auditorium at Waubonsee Valley for Mr. Dave Calvert, they need to contact my office before the March 24th Board of Ed meeting. And now I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Donahue.
We now move to our consent agenda items. I need a motion and a second for consent agenda items D through N.
I move that the Board of Education approve consent agenda items D through N as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Gentz?
Yes.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Mr. Karubas?
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick?
Yes.
Mr. Rising?
Yes.
Ms. Jane?
Yes.
And Ms. Donahue?
Yes, motion passes. Next, we move to our action items. I need a motion and a second to approve the amended budget as presented.
Move that the Board of Education approves the fiscal year 2025 amended, that would be the school years 24 through 25 school year, amended budget approval as presented.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising?
Yes.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Ms. Gentz?
Yes.
Mr. Karubas?
Yes.
Ms. Donahue?
Yes,
Ms. Fosdick?
Yes.
And Ms. Jane?
Yes.
the motion passes. Okay, I now need a motion and a second to approve the gifts and donations report for the first semester for the 2024-2025 school year as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the gifts and donations report 2024-25 first semester as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Dr. Talley, can you just remind the public what this is? Of the gifts and donations report?
I just want to pull it up. It just helps me to. There we go. These are gifts, and a school district is only as good as our connection with our community and our engagement with our families. And so these are gifts that are given and donations given to our schools through a variety of organizations or people who donate either direct money or other items to the schools. And so this is acknowledging what the schools and gifts we have received and other services that we've received.
Thanks, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thank you.
No, it's important. it's valuable to take a look at that because you see how generous our community is and our families in supporting our district. And we couldn't do this without that help and support, so thank you. Michelle, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Demme,
Aye.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
and Ms. Jane.
Yes.
The motion passes. Now we'll have a presentation from Dr. Trudy Ransom regarding the Indian Prairie Education Foundation, which is a major contributor to supporting the district, these programs.
Good evening, and thank you once again for having me here to do my mid-year report for the Indian Prairie Educational Foundation. My name is Dr. Trudy Ranson, and I am the Executive Director of the Indian Prairie Educational Foundation, also known as IPEF. I am proud and honored to be serving in my third year as Executive Director for the Foundation. We are delighted to renew our partnership with the district for the 36th year. We have been around since 1988, and we have come a long way since then. But our overall mission remains the same: to be your dedicated partner to enrich education for students, all students, supporting their academic, artistic, emotional, and physical needs. Here tonight, I'm going to give you our mid-year report and a preview of some of our upcoming events at the foundation. Some of you might recognize those yellow shirts. As part of our full financial disclosure policy, I wanted to give the actual numbers to the board and to the public of our section of the mid-year giving report. This is, I am incredibly proud to say, the largest one semester donation in goods and services that the foundation has given to District 204 in the last 10 years. Wow. So I just wanted to show you sort of how our funding overview broke down this year. District support, Team IPEF, grants, the A+ award, and Kid Essentials are our 5 biggest categories. And I also wanted to break down the district support because that does include a lot of our regular programs, the Fine Arts Festival, Valley Runway, Young Hearts for Life. All 3 of those programs are how much we have spent so far this year. And a bonus program that we were able to provide this year, thanks to a grant from the Illinois State Board of Education and in collaboration with Dr. Tara Bell here at the district offices. We were awarded a substantial grant to help support the district's RISE after-school programs. These programs support after-school programs for low-income students in our district at Brookdale, Cowlishaw, Georgetown, Gombert, Longwood, McCarty, and Welch Elementaries, and also at Fisher, Hill, and Granger Middle Schools. And we are proud to present 3 very widely diverse kind of programs for these students. The Man in the Black Chucks, who is a middle school youth development social emotional learning speaker. The African American Men of Unity and their after-school mentoring program for both middle school and elementary school students. And the Joy of Reading, or Club Joy, which is for our elementary students a reading interventions program in the form of a fun and engaging book club. And then they get to go on a field trip down to the Harold Washington University, or library, Harold Washington Library, at the end of the semester. Our A+ award program is in its 11th year, and so far this year we have given out 5 awards to outstanding teachers and staff members, everyone from an ELL teacher to a first-year teacher to an administrator to a robotics coach. We are hitting all the buttons, and no spoilers, but we will see you all tomorrow at Mattia Valley to hand out award number 6. Go Mustangs. Team IPEF 2024 finally wrapped up in January with the Big Check Tour. I had a really great time going around to our various schools, handing it with my giant, oversized IPEF check. Everybody loves it when I show up with that thing. But this year, Team IPEF 2024 had 285 participants. That is staff, students, community members, parents, alumni. Everyone gets together to support their schools. All 34 buildings had a team this year, and we raised over $80,000. Now, of course, half of the money raised by our runners at each school gets returned to their school. So we got to write a very big check for over almost $39,000 out to the various schools. And I would like to give a special shout out to tiny little Graham Elementary, the small school with the very big heart, who was our biggest fundraiser this year. They raised over $12,000 for Team IPEF this year, and I had the privilege of giving them back a check for $7,122. All of this money is complete, as I say, mad money, so the schools can spend it in whatever way they need to, on whatever programs they would need a little extra money that might not be in the budget. So it's always fun to see what they do with it. It's anything from friendship benches to software that an entire middle school uses. We have a good time seeing how they spend it, and we are very grateful to everyone who runs with Team IPEF, including everyone who is sitting up here, who has at one time or another run for our team. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate the community's support for this important fundraiser. This year we gave out 10 teacher innovation grants. We had quite a few pretty cool entries this year. Everything from STEM, and we did hit science, technology, engineering, and math, so I feel like we ran the whole gamut there. World language grants, reading grants, writing grants, SEL, art, and we did have a really nice spread 4 elementary, 3 middle school, and 3 high school grants this year. Shout out to Granger and their Bluebird houses that they do as part of their hands-on projects. The students actually build their own, so it's really kind of a nifty thing to see. And the other picture up there is from our Gaming Across America. So we do all kinds of fun classroom supports so that teachers can try out innovative approaches to education. Okay, I'm super proud of this one. So is Dr. Talley. We were so proud we had to collaborate because we were both going to mention it. But I would like to say that our cardiac screenings program is a huge undertaking. We only do it every other year, partly because of that, partly because of cost. But IPEF is proud to fund this program because every time we do it, I'll keep saying it, it saves lives. And I brought you the real up-to-date numbers. We just finished Mattia Valley at the beginning of February, and they were our last school to go. As you can see, each high school exceeded 1,600 students. Waubonsie Valley edged everybody out just a little bit. Congratulations, Warriors, but the turnout this year was just amazing. And it wasn't just the turnout for screenings. The volunteers that came out to help us, I cannot thank them enough. Obviously, this can't be done, and you can see this needs a massive amount of volunteers. This year, over 580 in total, and 36 students were flagged for further review in the aggregate at our high schools. That is 36 students who were flagged with an abnormal ECG. The students are referred on to an additional screening, an additional doctor's visit, and these tests have a false positive rate of less than 1%. So that is 36 students and families whose lives we have directly impacted just this year by the program. And because I'm a statistics person and I can't help myself, I wanted to give you the overall numbers this year. Since we began in 2008-2009 school year, we have screened over 44,000 high school students. 444 were referred on for further review, and over 4,400 volunteers from our community have come out to help us with this important program. It really does take a community, it really does take a village, and look at all of those children that we helped. So for everyone in our community who participated in this, thank you. And we are looking forward to doing this again in the, let me see if I get this straight now, 26-27 school year. Thank you also to our partners, the Young Hearts for Life nonprofit association, Endeavor Health, and International Paper for helping us present and make these screenings available for all of our students. In the academic enrichment category, near and dear to my heart, we did a lot of music support in the first semester. Collage, Crystal Prism, our holiday concerts were amazing as always. Wonderful job to the students. Meet the Artist at Wabansie Valley and the Masterworks concert at Neuqua Valley High School. Both well worth seeing if you haven't had the opportunity. I threw the Madrigal Singers up there because I could. And congratulations to the Madrigals for not only performing at the Collage concert, but also for performing around our community and spreading holiday cheer. In the STEM category, we have already had several high school robotics tournaments taking place, and our middle school robotics tournament just took place at the beginning of February. Congratulations to Team Crone C, an all-girls robotics team who took the championship at the February tournament. Upcoming, we have our elementary robotics tournament on March 7th and 8th. IPEF is incredibly proud to continue to support robotics in District 204. And finally, I'd like to invite you all to breakfast because it's the most important meal of the day. And there will be coffee, I promise. We are going to do the Inspire event a little differently this year. In the past, it has been a night event, but we wanted to make sure that we had everyone in a room. It's a captive audience. We're going to feed you breakfast, and we are going to tell you about our mission and about the programs. The highlights this year will be our fine arts support, our cardiac screenings, and our Kid Essentials program. So please come. If you haven't already bought your tickets, tickets will be on sale for another about a couple of weeks or until they sell out, which is a distinct possibility as I'm running the numbers. So please do join us. We would love to see you. If you would like to sponsor, sponsorships are due 1 week from today. Finally, if those out in YouTube land are wondering how they can make a difference, how you can make a difference, please join us at our Inspire Breakfast, find out what we're all about. Or you can register for Team IPEF 2025. I know it seems really early to be talking about this, but charity registration to get the most bang for your discount runs from March 3rd through April the 30th. And so you will be seeing all of those yellow shirted posts in your social media. You can nominate a teacher or a staff member for the A+ award, anyone who has gone above and beyond for you, for your student. We would love to hear your stories. And then finally, if you'd like to learn more about any of these programs that I have discussed tonight, please visit our IPEF website at ipef204.org. Or you can contact me directly at Trudy_Ranson at ipsd.org. I would love to answer any questions that you may have for me this evening. Thank you very much for having me again, and I'm open for questions.
I'm just going to open it up to anyone if they have any questions or comments.
I just have one quick question. Will IPEF still be taking donations for Valley Runway, and if so, when does that happen?
Valley Runway is actually happening this Friday at Graham Elementary. I believe that the appointments are already scheduled for this year, but we do take donations for gowns and accessories year-round because we do have to find clothing for a lot of girls. For those of you not familiar with the Valley Runway Project, it is the opportunity for students who might not be able to afford to go to prom to come in and select a prom dress of their choice on this special day. So I'm looking forward to attending that event on Friday.
I just wanted to not only compliment you, but I know you have a board of very dedicated, committed parents and community members in our district, so I just wanted to give a shout out to them as well, because I know they help you with a lot of these things, because you can't do it all yourself. So just wanted to give that shout out.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for everything that you do, Trudy. I know it's a lot of effort, but it's a loved effort, and it really is a very expansive array of things that you get involved with, from music to robotics to, Project Runway, all sorts of different aspects of helping out our community and our students. And I know it doesn't come without a lot of work. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. We are glad to be of service to the district.
Okay, we will now have a presentation from Mr. Matt Shipley regarding the 2026-2030 financial forecast.
All right. Good evening again, Board of Education. I guess most people were here for the amended budget this evening, so thank you for allowing me to present this evening twice, both on the amended budget for the current fiscal year, but then to also look forward to our financial forecast. And our primary focus is going to be the next 5 years, so fiscal years 2026 to 2030. Although as part of the presentation, we're going to look back a little bit, as well as looking at the current year, as well as even go past 2030 in some instances too. So this is the most comprehensive review and of the long-range forecast for the district that we give to the board each year. Tonight's presentation is consistent with Board Policy 4.10, as well as Strategic Plan Priority Number 4. And I'll mention we were here a few weeks ago, myself, Dr. Talley, and Dr. Lee, presenting on the statewide Vision 2030. And I know there was a comment or an ask that we sort of worked to tie some presentations with that Vision 2030. And so one of the things I'll emphasize that we talked about in that presentation that'll sort of kind of come up several times in this presentation is the importance of predictability in financing public education. And so we'll talk about some revenue sources and some actions that are fairly predictable for our district, as well as some that are maybe a little less so. And we can talk about the potential impacts in that as a result of that. But again, one of the key pillars of that Vision 2030 is just that for our districts and for our students to really excel, we need to have that predictability and stability in place for our districts. Tonight's presentation really is kind of the presentation that kicks off our annual budget process, although of course the budget is a year-round process, and we'll also make mentions of some actions that and some discussions we've already had at a district level as we look forward to next year. So our focus or agenda, we're going to start by just looking at a summary of the prior year operating budget and compare that to our actual results that we've now received. We'll look at where we are year to date, so through the first 6 months of this current school year, again, comparing budget to actual. We'll look at our operating revenues, a 5-year forecast for those revenues. We'll also look at an operating expenditure 5-year forecast and talk about some specific expenditure challenges that we're having. We'll look at our non-operating funds, which is our capital projects and debt service funds. Those are the funds that are going to look the most different from prior years as a result of our successful referendum. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking specifically at our fund balance, sort of a long-range projection and analysis for our fund balance, as well as sort of an initial proposal that administration would like to bring to the board this evening for how to maybe better manage our fund balance or or use those funds in the future. And then finally, we'll just close with a summary. I'll be available for any questions, and we could talk about the next steps as we move towards the 2026 fiscal year. So just want to start before we really dive into our operating funds, just kind of providing a few key definitions or overview of our operating funds. Again, I know in education and definitely the business office is no different. We tend to talk in jargon and abbreviations. So hopefully a few times this evening we're just going to try and take a deep breath and maybe take a step back and talk through some of what we mean by some of these terms. So when we talk about our operating funds, we're talking about six separate funds or six separate sources of money that are maintained by the district. And those six funds are our education fund, our operations and maintenance fund, transportation fund, IMRF, which itself is an abbreviation for the municipal retirement fund and Social Security, a working cash fund, and then a tort liability fund. All these funds are reported in accordance with State Board of Education requirements. So all school districts across the state are required to maintain these funds and report revenues and expenses in the same format within them. The focus of these funds is really the day-to-day operations of the district and revenues dedicated to fund daily operations. So this is the overwhelming majority of both our revenues and our expenditures. And again, they're tied to sort of annual recurring expenses. And so as a result, these operating funds are not directly impacted by our recently successful Safer, Stronger 204 referendum. And that's why when we passed the amended budget earlier this evening, we were pretty explicit that that really just impacts those non-operating funds, which we'll cover later in the evening. So talking about the operating funds, the first step this evening is really to look at last year, or the 23-24 school year, and talk about the actual results compared to budget. We have received our audit back, and that was provided to the board several weeks ago, as well as being posted online. It's publicly available for any community member and any user of those financial statements. But that audit was completed and met all requirements. It was a clean audit, which meant we received no control deficiencies or compliance findings. We had no significant adjustments to the financial statements as a part of that audit. As part of the audit, the auditors reviewed two grant programs. They reviewed our ESSER grant, or the federal COVID relief funds, as well as our Title I program, and again, found no compliance issues with those grant programs. We will obtain recognition status from the State Board of Education as a result of that audit. So this is we're going on several years in a row of obtaining that recognition status. And I'll point out one of the key drivers of that is that we ended the year with about a 39% fund balance to revenues ratio. And that compares to 25%, which is required for recognition status. And again, it's been almost 2 years now since we really started talking about that fiscal year and what the budget priorities would be. But I just want to say we did generally meet those priorities that were in the budget. And that was to fund some summer and auxiliary learning programs, which were tied with the ESSER funding. It was to complete a significant elementary ELA curriculum adoption, as well as several other curriculum adoptions that we did during the year. And then also it was to fund capital projects out of operating. So again, this budget was pre-referendum. It was pre-having that referendum funding source for capital, and so we did make a priority of completing some capital projects out of operations. We did these priorities knowing that we had several non-recurring revenue sources occurring in that fiscal year, and that included those ESSER grant funds, which have now expired, but it also included some interest income as interest rates continued to rise during that fiscal year, as well as some one-time CPPRT revenues or replacement tax revenues. And so this shows the prior year budget to actual, comparing the actual results to what the budget we passed back in the summer of 2023, and shows the variance there. So I want to say both revenues and expenditures were over budget, and they were both over budget by approximately $10 million. 10 million is obviously a large number, but given the size of our budget, that's just over 2% of the total budget for both revenues and expenditures. We didn't you know, as you know, we amended the budget this evening for some non-operating needs, and we didn't amend the budget despite it being over for revenues and expenditures for a few reasons. The first is that in total, the budget was balanced. You could see that our surplus and deficit came really almost, you know, less than $23,000 in line with budget. So there wasn't a need to amend the budget because of a deficit. Our expenditures, although they were above budget, did tie really closely to the revenue that was over budget as well. We did acknowledge these variances throughout the fiscal year when we updated the board, and so that was sort of our informal acknowledgement of some of those variances. And then just in looking at some of the specific state legal requirements, none of these variances triggered like a legal requirement at the state level to amend the budget. So I did want to acknowledge that although we were over budget in a few areas, there wasn't the need to amend the budget like we did this year. So with that, I just added a few specific comments I wanted to make about some of the specific line items where maybe we saw significant variances for the prior year. So first, when we look at that other local revenues, we were above budget by $3.8 million. This was a budget number that we had already sort of increased from prior years, but we saw even more revenue, again, tied primarily to higher interest rates. So the district, we received a significant source of our revenues, property taxes. We received that all at the beginning of the year, and so we have an opportunity to invest those funds and earn interest. And we're investing in very short-term investment products, so things that are very closely tied to the federal funds rate and to what you see as some of the short-term interest rates you may see when you drive by a bank and they're kind of flashing what they're offering on a 6-month or 12-month CD. So while that was good that we received some of those influx of interest revenue, again, that's tied and can change very quickly as interest rates decrease. And we've started to see an environment where that federal funds rate is starting to come back down. And so we are starting to prepare for lower interest rates in the future. The second large revenue variance was in the federal revenue space of about $5.4 million. We did receive some one-time federal grants, primarily tied with the ESSER funding that we were able to develop specific programming around that drove that increase. I'll also point out our school lunch participation has increased significantly over the past couple of years too, and we've sort of, from a budgetary standpoint, struggled to keep up with the higher participation we're seeing. A lot of that's tied directly to our participation in what's known as the CEP program. So last year was the first year we were able to offer free lunches for all students at several of our buildings, and we've actually been able to increase that by another building or two this past school year. And so we're seeing an increase in revenues, but that does tie with an increase of expenses as well. So the two expenses that were sort of significantly over budget that I'll quickly highlight. The first is purchase services. So again, that's purchases related to some of those federal grants I just mentioned, whether it's the school lunch program, whether it's specific summer programming or programming where we were using contractual services to deliver services. We also have, I think, talked with the board over the past several years about we are using some contractual services to fill some special ed needs. Some specific high need services are now being provided through purchase services as opposed to maybe a full-time employee, and that is kind of creating a little bit of variance. You'll see our salary variance, for example, is favorable, but then that's offset partially by that purchase service being over budget. And then the second area was capital outlay. So again, this was pre-referendum. We saw an opportunity as some of those interest revenues were coming in above what we budgeted to use those one-time funds for some one-time capital projects. And so we really felt excited about the opportunity in the summer of 2024 to use those funds to increase our capital outlay program. So with that said, this is now the year-to-date budget to actual operating funds. And so this is through December 31st, 2024. So it's 6 months of actual data, and then using sort of projected or forecasted budget data for the remaining 6 months, and then kind of comparing that to our budget. On its face, it looks fairly similar to what we saw last year, where we have a positive variance in revenues that's roughly offset by expenditures being over budget. But I do believe there's some key differences when we really dig into some of these line items that are impacted in some of the data. So first of all, on the revenue trend, again, revenues are trending above budget. However, you'll see that federal revenue variance has gone away. And again, that's with the expiration of the ESSER funding. So it really is just that excess interest income that's really driving that positive revenue variance. When we go down the expense variances, again, a difference from last year, we're now over budget on salaries. So our goal, you may remember when we presented the last budget, was to decrease FTE by about 8 FTE, just to recognize that the ESSER funding had expired and we were going to need to sort of right-size our staffing. But as we got into some of the specific needs we had as we prepared for this upcoming school year, we actually increased FTE by about 5 positions. And so we have a variance in FTE of about 13 between what's occurring today in our schools and what we had budgeted. We're continuing to also use some of the purchase services line items to fill some of those special education needs as well. You'll see not a lot of the variance is coming from capital outlay. We are spending very little for capital out of operating this year. And then you will see a variance tied to that other objects category, and that is primarily driven by a significant increase in outplaced students. So these are students with significant needs that after working very closely with our student services department, a decision's made that the best way to support those students is through an outplaced environment or through them being placed in another facility. That's really a last resort for our team, and after we've had many years of successfully sort of minimizing the number of students we outplace and having that number decline slightly or stay stable, but we've now seen a significant increase, and that those students, that outplacement does have a significant budgetary cost with it. So as that increase has gone up, we've exceeded the budget in that area. And so really what's sort of the overlying message or that we're looking to as we talk about kind of looking at both prior year as well as year to date. So in both years, our revenue has performed favorably compared to the budget. But again, that's primarily been temporary revenues in both years. In 23-24, we were using that additional revenue to support temporary programs. So again, some one-time grant-funded programs, some one-time capital programs. However, this year we've now seen a shift where that additional revenue is supporting core programming, it's supported legally required services, it's supporting our student services operation, it's supporting recurring expenditures. And so we're now at a point where our recurring revenues no longer support current expense trends. And so as a result, we've been proactive as an administration, and we've begun taking steps to address the budget challenge for next school year. But we'll show here shortly that while we balance the current year, we're still working to look at how that trends out and results in a balanced budget going forward. So shown here is our operating funds forecast for the next 5 years for fiscal year 2026 through 2030. Again, you'll notice in fiscal year 2026, we are projecting a small surplus of about $57,000. That is after we've projected some reductions for next school year, and we'll talk primarily in the expenditure section here about what those specific reductions are. But then going forward into 2027 and on, we are projecting small deficits ranging from about $1.3 million to about $3 million over that period. And so if the current revenue trends hold, that does mean that we'll need to look at some further expense reductions or changes to our programming or expense structure to ensure a balanced budget. So now we'd like to transition a little bit and just look at our summary of the revenues that are included in this 5-year forecast. So we'll start sort of with the traditional pie chart that shows how our revenues break down, and this does tend to be very consistent between fiscal years. So the district continues to be extremely reliant on local property tax revenues, with property tax revenues representing 78% of our operating revenues. Sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about state and federal revenues. Tonight will be no exception. But as a reminder, those represent just 14% and 3% respectively of our revenues. Other local revenues makes up a smaller portion, about 5%. Again, that includes the interest revenues we've already talked about. It includes student fees, services. It includes some building rental revenues. It just really includes a variety of transactions and fees generated at the local level. There's a lot on this chart here, and I don't want to go into every box or line item here, but just wanted to put through in sort of one graph some of the key drivers of our property tax revenue, the key assumptions we're making about those assumptions, and then also not just the impact on the district operating revenue, but also the impact on district taxpayers. So property taxes, as you know, operate differently than most, if not all, the other taxes that our residents and individuals pay. And so I think sometimes it can get a little confusing how actions taken by this board or assumptions we're making about our property tax revenues impact our taxpayers as individuals. And so this document here, or this chart, kind of summarizes how the different assumptions or pieces of that property tax puzzle impact both the district but also our taxpayers. The couple I'll just highlight quickly. The main driver for how much revenue we project is the Consumer Price Index. For tonight's forecast, we are assuming the actual Consumer Price Indexes for 2023 and 2024, as well as a projection range of 2 to 2.5% for the remaining future years. The reason this is the most critical assumption is because our tax levy is capped to the CPI each year. If you look at the far column there where we talk about other considerations, that does mean as we really look to manage our budget, it's important that our expenses also are tied or we do our best to manage those expenses towards CPI. And when we get into the expenditure section, I've chosen 2 expenses tonight to highlight that are specifically increasing above the Consumer Price Index, and as a result are ultimately taking funds away from other district programs in order to meet those needs. The second piece I'll cover is just kind of our new property and TIF distribution section here. So while CPI is sort of the cap on current or existing property, the district does receive additional tax revenue when there's new property added to the district. About $50 million of new property generates about $2.5 million in new revenue annually, and that's about what we're assuming. I'll point out, though, that new property often, especially if it's residential, means new students. And so a lot of times, depending on the property type, we will see students generated in excess of what that new property is generating in revenue. One of the challenges as a district is, as many of you know, a lot of our new property over the past several years has been residential. And it has been a variety of property types. We've seen everything from apartments and townhomes all the way to single families still being added to the district. And that's why it's so important as we see the headlines about some new commercial developments finally coming into the district. That's why it's so important that we continue to encourage commercial development in the district. We continue to work collaboratively with our cities. We continue to encourage our residents to shop local and patronize those local businesses because that is so important for our property tax base. And again, while it's good news that we are seeing some new commercial redevelopment, I personally will probably be the first person in line when Stan's Donuts opens in the next couple months. You know, it's been a long time coming, and we really are still playing catch up on that commercial development piece. Yeah. And the TIF distributions piece really speaks to that as well. We are anticipating we'll start receiving some distributions from the city of Aurora for residential property within the Fox Valley TIF. However, we're only receiving those distributions for residential property. Any commercial property within that is still not generating property tax revenue for the district and won't for the length of the TIF, which is still another 10 plus years. So this next slide is attempting to talk to, at a high level, that taxpayer impact column of the previous slide. So how are taxpayers impacted by those sort of CPI increases each year that occur to our levy? And the truth is that their impact really depends on what happens to property values, both at an aggregate or global level, as well as the property value of the individual taxpayer. So right now, our current property tax rate is the lowest it's been in 10 plus years. It's coming in, it came in at about 5.2 for 2023, our most recent year. And if some of our projections hold, we believe it'll continue to decrease over the next several years. And again, we'll emphasize that Safer, Stronger 204 proposal did not result in a tax rate increase. So the tax rate, again, is stable or slightly declining. With that said, if individual property tax payers have seen a significant increase in their property values, an increase above maybe what's occurring in the broader market or occurring in our area, they will see a significant increase in their taxes paid. And we know we heard a lot about that over the past year as a result of the tax rate, the reassessment of properties that occurred within the district. We don't believe it'll be as significant this year, but again, something we continue to monitor, how individual property values, how different property types, so residential, commercial, or industrial, how those values are kind of ebbing and flowing within the district. So moving on to state revenues, again, I'll just emphasize we talked a little bit last time about the importance of predictability of funding. We talk about how important that predictability was, and then we kind of transition into the current state budget situation. And so if you had made a Google search of the state fiscal year budget within the last couple weeks, you would have seen headlines similar to what's shown here, where the state was talking about projecting over a $3 billion deficit. Really, that is the result of some long-term structural imbalances, the expiration of federal ESSER funding, and just some growth in tax revenues maybe stagnating a little bit from significant increases over the past couple years. Some good news, I guess. The governor's budget address was last week, and he did announce a balanced budget. There were some last-minute revenue adjustments, which sort of increased revenue slightly. But there were some programming reductions, most significantly in the education space towards early childhood, that were not included in the budget. We expect to continue to see the budget discussion evolve throughout the spring, but traditionally the governor's budget speech, especially with both legislative chambers being controlled by the same party as the governor, we expect to come in close to where this budget was. I'll point out that the statutory increase to EBF funding is included in this budget, but it includes only level funding for categorical payments. And then finally, we are not included directly in this year's budget discussion, but we continue to monitor two significant issues within the state, pension reform and the need to address Tier 2 pension funding specifically, as well as the potential for changes to the property tax structure. We're not aware of any specific proposals on either that seem to have significant legs, but we are continuing to monitor that and assess its impact on the district. So again, just talking about state revenues really quick. If the governor's proposed budget goes through, IPSD would see an increase of EBF funding of approximately $500,000. So that's an increase of about 1% of our EBF funding. So again, thinking about where CPI is, that would come in below what the Consumer Price Index has been over the past couple of years. We do have what's known as a hold harmless provision within the EBF funding, so we are guaranteed we'd receive at least the same amount we did as the prior year. But when we talk about categorical funding, flat categorical funding could cause a reduction in Indian Prairie funding because there's no similar hold harmless provision within the categorical funding. Categoricals as a revenue source are supposed to fund a significant portion of transportation expenditures and outplaced student expenditure payments. Those are both costs that are rising above inflation. We already talked about the outplaced student tuition, and we'll talk about transportation here shortly. And so what you can see is when there's flat funding combined with an increase in costs, and again, a fairly significant increase in cost, you can see that proration percentage, or the percentage that those categoricals are actually funding, continues to decrease. And you'll see that the levels we're projecting for next year are some of the lowest levels the state has seen, going back to even the beginning of the Great Recession. And again, you'll see a real significant drop-off really over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that special education transportation, categorical in particular, is really surprising to me. You can see even in some of the leanest state budget years, there was a commitment to fund that above 90%, and we're now projecting that to fall below 70%. Again, talking about another area where that concern about predictability comes up, we'll move to federal revenues. And so, again, here's sort of a recent Google search if you just wanted to read a little bit about the Department of Education. And so, again, most of the focus when you do that now is about whether the Department of Education will continue to exist here or continue to be the entity that it is in the near future. And so just wanted to spend a few minutes digging into how some of that news about the federal government would impact Indian Prairie. So I'll start with sort of, we'll call it good news, and then kind of move to some of the challenges. So first of all, a reminder, federal funding does represent just 3% of our revenues. So again, we talk a lot about it, but in the total picture, it is just 3% of our total revenues. And those revenues actually come from several departments, not just the Department of Education. And so, again, you think about, school district, you'd expect the funding to primarily be through the Department of Education, but we actually receive significant funds through the Department of Agriculture. That's the school lunch program. And we receive funds through Health and Human Services as well. That includes Medicaid and a few other programs. Most of the funding that comes through the Department of Education is tied to statutory requirements, which even predate the department's creation. And that's primarily the IDEA and Title I grants. So again, just kind of big picture, there is some diversity and exposure here when we talk about what a change to federal revenues could look like for us. But it's important to remember a reduction would still impact all students, because most of this funding is tied to legally required programming. So it's programming we would still have to offer even if the funding is not provided. And then specifically with the school lunch program, I just wanted to point out, the school lunch program subsidizes all lunches purchased. It's not just students with that free and reduced lunch status. So again, if that funding were to be reduced, and again, it's not directly through the Department of Education at this time, but if there was some changes to that programming, that wouldn't just impact those free and reduced lunch students. That would impact all our students and really our ability to offer the lunch program as it's currently structured. All right, and so with that sort of background of where we are with our operating revenues, just want to spend a few minutes tonight talking about our forecast for expenses. So again, just starting with showing how our expenses break out in total. Again, this is very consistent with prior years, and this is consistent for all years throughout the forecast. Salaries and benefits continue to be our largest expense, totaling about 77% combined. The next largest source is purchase services at 15%. That includes our transportation services, our food services, as well as our building operations team. So those are largely funding people who are in our buildings, who are working with our students and working with our staff on a daily basis as well. And then when we get into other areas of the budget, we're now talking less than 10% of our budget spent on supplies, technology, and other objects. The forecast is built to reflect all known agreements. So that's all our union agreements, significant contracts, and all known obligations. And then it reflects our best estimates for expenses that are not covered by a contract or have a contract that expire at a point in the forecast. So as I mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of discussions as an administrative team, really starting in the fall, about how we would sort of bring our projected expenditures in line with our resources. So as a result, some of the reduction measures we are starting to enact for next school year include a net reduction of 19 FTE or full-time equivalents in our headcount. But with that said, it really is a specific focus going position by position to really identify what the needs of the district are. And so even though there's a net reduction, we still have additional positions next year to help focus on our ELL services, as well as anticipated general enrollment growth. Just to talk about sort of priorities and other presentations the board's received over the past several months, we have heard from our EL team about the need for additional staff to complete those services, and that is being addressed for next year. And then again, we know the priority that the board and our administration has put towards class sizes, specifically class sizes at the K2 level. And so we have allocated some additional positions to ensure those smaller class sizes are possible next year. Again, that does mean there were some difficult decisions on some reductions, but we are looking at 28 reductions that again are tied to a review of the specific needs and specific positions that we were able to review and believe we can and we believe are not as student facing and not a direct impact to the classroom as some of those needs are. We will have no increases for discretionary budgets. These are the budgets that support our curriculum, technology, and other supplies. So this is the second year those budgets will effectively be frozen with no increases. And we will be proposing to the board later this spring that we increase our registration and other fees by approximately 5%. Again, those are tied to specific costs that are increasing. This would be about the first time in 7 or 8 years that we would come to the board with increase in the registration fees. So that's not a decision we took lightly either, but we do feel it's appropriate and necessary given the current environment. Again, I emphasized earlier just that need to keep the relationship between revenues and expenditures tied together, and specifically with property taxes tied to CPI. Our goal is to really keep our expenditures in line with the Consumer Price Index. So I just wanted to touch on two sort of supporting expenditures that are rising above the Consumer Price Index and that we as administration are really trying to work proactively to manage, but are still challenging to keep in line with the Consumer Price Index. So the first is transportation expense. And I think we've shown a similar graph to this in the past, but in the blue is sort of a cumulative increase in the Consumer Price Index since 2019. So again, we had some years where CPI was pretty significant, and that accumulated increase is about 25%. The challenge is if you look at the cost of a transportation route, so the rate we're charged per route, that number's increased by over 80%. So that's growing at over 3 times the rate of CPI. And that's what's shown in the orange here. So we're really seeing that challenge to try and keep that expense tied to CPI, and that really is seeing the underlying costs associated with transportation, whether it's fuel costs, cost of driver wages, the cost of the capital, so just the cost of busing. We're seeing across the industry, across the country, those costs continue to increase. There is a little bit of good news, though, in that the district has identified efficiencies and worked to put efficiencies in the system, and so that's sort of that green line there. So you can see that we're trending above CPI, but we're still keeping our total expense below that rate, the actual rate charge per route. That does equate to about $6 million in savings. So since 2019, we've come up with operating efficiencies which have saved over $6 million annually in transportation expense. And I just want to point out what some of those efficiencies are. First, I'll give some credit, or I'll give a lot of credit to our transportation team. Their work with technology integration, our scheduling, keeping a very high on-time performance metric is critical to driving that savings. That's obviously the most significant part. But our board and our community has done a part of that as well. If you remember our boundary changes, decreased miles driven by 18% of part of our transportation network. And so that was a significant driver of savings as well that we've seen sort of accumulate over the past several years. But the credit also goes all the way down to our school personnel. So these are our principals and other leaders at the school that make sure that we're getting arrivals checked in quickly, we're getting dismissals out quickly, because we rely on a 3-tier system. So when high school ends at 2:25, we need those buses on the road by 2:30 to ensure we can meet our middle school and elementary routes. And so our school personnel play a key role in that as well, and that again allows us to schedule as efficiently as possible. The second expense challenge I just wanted to cover relates to energy or electricity. So we are budgeting a 20% increase in budget electricity costs due to the increased delivery and demand capacity charges. This again is really tied to a nationwide challenge. I have a headline there from a few weeks ago where it was noted that we're going to see record high electricity costs coming soon to Illinois. Illinois has actually been performing a little better compared to other regions of the country when it comes to grid challenges, but the truth is we're seeing an increased demand. tied to data centers, tied to electrification. But we're seeing really only stable or actually reducing electricity supply out there as different coal-based power plants and other power plants are sort of sunsetted. They're not being replaced at the same rate to ensure that energy supply keeps up with demand. So again, we've for many years maintained existing strategies to try and manage that cost, and we're really doubling down on some of those strategies. So that includes expanding our use of demand response programs and collaborating with both ComEd and the City of Naperville on how we reduce our usage. It includes our LED lighting initiative, which we've included in our capital plan for this upcoming year. We are starting to evaluate potential for solar generation, so solar panels on our district facilities. That is something that was not included in the master facility plan or in the referendum, so we would have to find a funding source for that. And then just a real continued focus in everything we do on how we efficiently use energy and address our capital needs in an efficient manner. So that was the operating funds, and now I do want to transition to our non-operating funds. And we do have two non-operating funds maintained by the district, our debt service and capital funds. And again, before we get into them, I just want to provide a little bit of background or definitions around those funds. So the focus on these funds is really the long-term investment in district facilities. That's primarily the capital projects fund. And then the repayment of related financing, which is the debt service fund. So again, operating funds, we were talking day-to-day operations. With non-operating funds, we were looking at really a longer-term horizon for the district. In general, there's very limited recurring revenue available for capital investment. And again, we talked about that as part of the Vision 2030 presentation, that there is a need statewide for some recurring revenue source tied to capital. So these are the funds that were impacted by our successful Safer, Stronger 204 referendum. And the Safer, Stronger 204 referendum is required to be tracked separately just to ensure compliance with various legal and compliance requirements tied to the bond. And so we will show those funds separately here tonight as well. Before we sort of show the specific funds, there are two sort of background slides I want to go into. The first, just kind of providing an overview of the debt service fund and just some concepts as we look at how this fund is going to function going forward after the successful referendum. So again, our Safer, Stronger 204 bond referendum allows for $420 million of issuances through 2029. So we've gone many years where this fund was really stable and was really about just repaying bonds and not a lot of decisions going on in this fund. Now we will have the ability to issue bonds and impact this fund for the foreseeable future. The board actually has the full authority to issue and structure the repayment schedule of these bonds. So what is legally authorized by the referendum is just the total dollar amount of issuances. With that said, we made a commitment to our taxpayers to keep the current bond rate at 37 cents and to not increase that rate. So as we look to structure bonds, that really becomes our guiding principle, is to not increase the rate above that 37 cents. And so we'll show a few concepts here in a few minutes or two, but just some things to think about, again, thinking about how property taxes work and some of the concepts we talked about earlier. As our EAV or property values increase, that would reduce the tax rate if we kept the bond payments the same. We're also going to be adding new property to the tax rolls as we go through and issue these bonds, and so it will be important to determine if we want to use that new property to increase annual payments and maybe pay the bonds off a little sooner, or if we want to use that to lower the rate or lower the amount of the bonds that have to be paid by current taxpayers. And just kind of the second background slide before we go in. This is again, I well past 2030, and even but looking all the way out to 2048. You'll see that our referendum-approved bonds are forecast to be spent by 2032. They're legally required to be spent by 2032. And so that means that there will be no referendum bond funds for 2033 and later. However, we will still have repayments of those bonds, and that's what's shown sort of on the second graph. And right now we're projecting we could repay those bonds all the way up to 2048. And so really, as we look at these next couple slides, some of the questions we're asking ourselves and in administration is, how do we ensure that there's capital funding available after those bonds, after the capital funding from the referendum is used in 2032? Because we know that those bonds will continue to need to be paid, and so we will have bond payments, but not necessarily a related source of revenue coming from those bonds. And really, this is the sort of challenge we're coming out of. We're coming out of a period after Mattia was built in 2009, where we were repaying bonds but didn't have a new source of funds. So we're trying to think about how we do not repeat the same challenges that we've had as a district over the last 10 plus years. So the first slide that hopefully kind of shows how we're thinking about this, or how we want to engage as we think about these bond issues is here. And so we've shown this slide or a similar version of this slide in the past as we showed proposed financings. So you can see it in gray, and now in the sort of the blue color, the ocean blue I'll call it. Those are bonds that now have already been issued, both our pre-referendum bonds as well as our first issuance in 2024. And so now we're thinking about how do we structure the remaining 3 issuances so that we are achieving a variety of goals, so that we're keeping the tax rate at or below 37 cents, so that we're paying the bonds off as soon as possible, and that we're potentially creating an opportunity to refinance the bonds in a way that's going to minimize that gap between when capital funds expire and when we're still paying off bonds. So I'll first point out, we can always reevaluate the structure with each new issue, as well as each refunding opportunity. So there will be an opportunity with each bond issue to specifically figure out where we are with our needs, where we are with our tax rate, and structure the bond accordingly. What's shown here is a proposal where we would increase the issue by about 1% each year. And so the goal would be that we say, well, we know we have some new property coming online, so if we increase what we want to pay towards the bonds, we could use that new property to effectively capture that excess. At the same time, as long as the EAV continues to grow a little bit each year, that would keep that tax rate stable or potentially decrease it each year. And so this is a proposal for future structurings where we would gradually increase that payment, but we could also see a declining tax rate being passed on to our taxpayers as well. And again, this would help minimize that gap between the time that our bond funds are used and when we're able to fully repay off the bonds. So if we take sort of that concept and look what that looks like over the next 5 years, you'll see that the total expenditures related to debt service would increase slightly each year, just about $200,000 to $300,000 each year. Shown here under debt service current issues, so that's bonds we've already issued, and you'll see we don't have a lot of flexibility over the next year or two, but as we get to that back half, you'll now of the 5 years, you'll now see those payments are really driven by bond issues we haven't completed yet. So the anticipated bond for this summer, as well as a bond in 2027 and 2029 as well. Again, just to reiterate, we can continue to reevaluate this, and our team will continue to be running scenarios and working with our municipal advisor to determine what the most appropriate structure is and make a recommendation. I will point out one other point. All of these assumptions are made assuming that our interest payments that our taxpayers receive continue to be exempt from federal income taxes. So that is part of what makes our bonds so competitive in the market and what keeps our interest expense relatively low compared to other forms of borrowing. Again, we're not aware of any specific initiatives at the federal level that would jeopardize that. But in this era of maybe some unpredictability, that is something that could really throw a significant curveball to us as we look at structuring our future bond issuances. All right, so moving on to our forecast for other revenues and capital projects. This is what we're looking at spending from those bond funds. I believe we've showed this several times in sort of the run-up to the referendum and in our capital projects discussions. So I'll just say we're still similar to or the same budget to what we've presented to the board in the past. Just something to point out, we do earn interest on those bond funds once the bond is issued. We talked a little bit about in the financing plan some of the restrictions around that interest, but those funds will also be available to supplement our capital projects as well, and we've started to budget for that as well. And then finally, just to show, again, these are our capital projects from our other revenues or for non-bond funds. Again, we're keeping these separate from our bond funds for legal reasons, but we do expect these funds to continue to generate at least a little bit of interest, income, and developer contributions over the next several years. Our plan is to not touch these funds until after 2032, again, to help fill that gap between when the bond funds are spent and when our bonds are still, payments are outstanding. So this will be the first source of additional funding we could look to after 2032. All right, and so now the home stretch tonight. Just wanted to touch back in on our fund balance and just provide a little bit of analysis of where we are in our fund balance and hopefully come with a little bit of a recommendation to start a conversation about how we better utilize that fund balance. So again, just gonna start by saying what is our fund balance? So fund balance, some synonyms would be our reserves, our equity, or our net assets. These represent available financial resources that ensure the district has capital to meet operating needs and prepare for unforeseen expenses or revenue delays. The way fund balances are created is over time, as you have operating surpluses, that builds up your fund balance. So as a district that's been around for 50 plus years, in general, we've gradually increased our fund balance slightly each year as we budget surpluses. It would decrease, therefore, with operating deficits or with strategic one-time purposes, one-time purchases. So the way you would spend down fund balance would be through deficit spending or through designated the funds for a one-time purchase. Fund balance is generally measured as a percentage of revenues, and that's really used to demonstrate the resources available and to address revenue variability or revenue delays. Our current board policy is for a 25% fund balance to revenue ratio. That's also a recommendation that's set in the State Board of Education's recognition status, which we mentioned earlier. And I'll point, it is a little bit of a coincidence that we use the 25%. That does happen to be kind of the right number for us. Each district, that fund balance percentage is going to vary based on their cash flows, based on how their revenues are distributed, based on what county they're in. So different counties distribute property taxes at different times, and that can impact that recommendation for that percentage. So there are some districts where a much higher fund balance percentage may be what they need. And there may be some districts where a much lower fund balance percentage still allows them to meet all their obligations. But for us, it seems like that 25% number is kind of the right number. And as mentioned previously, we're currently at 39%. And again, one thing that we'll show shortly here is that ratio does vary throughout the year. And so just showing our fund balance by month, you'll see each fund, again, we have 6 operating funds, is what's shown separately in the bar graphs, but I'll focus on sort of the line graph that's going across the top of this document. And you'll see that due to timing of property taxes and collections, there's almost a $200 million difference between our high point and our low point in monthly fund balance. So again, a very significant swing between our high point, generally in September and October, and our low point, which occurs in mid to late May. We talk about fund balance generally at June 30th, so at the beginning or the end of a fiscal year. And you'll see, relatively speaking, that is kind of a high point. Again, we do have months, March, April, and May specifically, that are significantly lower than that number. And that's why that 25% is so critical, to ensure that when we're at our low point, we still have the resources available to meet our obligations, make our vendor payments, make payroll, and again, have some reserve even after that to just for some unforeseen circumstances. Okay. With that said, if we just look at our operating fund balance as it stands today, we're projecting a $167 million fund balance at the end of this year. Our budgeted revenues for fiscal year 26 is $453 million. And so 25% of that number would be about $113 million. And so we do see that we're calculating in excess of that 25% of about 54.1 or 54.2 million. So again, that's in excess of that 25% that's necessary to meet cash flow needs. Just some concepts we've not done as a board or as an administration in the past, but we have the ability as an administration to make recommendations and as a board to accept a recommendation to designate fund balance for specific uses. This effectively segregates the funds to be used for that specific purpose, and then we can structure it so that they can then only be used for that specific purpose with additional board authorization. And so that is something that can be done to provide the board assurances that those funds are going to be used for that specific purpose. But it can also be structured in a way that gives some flexibility to that use as well. And so as we look towards fiscal year 2026 budget, this is something that administration would recommend we do, is look at how we can sort of start designating some of our fund balance to ensure that we're meeting future needs and obligations and just providing for the financial wherewithal of the district. So here's just sort of our initial recommendation or thoughts that we would like to we'd like to explore over the next couple of months. Is we would take of that $54 million, we would designate $42 million of that for future capital needs or contingency, and that would leave about $12.2 million, which we would then designate for various operating support. So just talking about the $42 million, again, that would be restricting $42 million of the operating fund balance. So we would not move it to capital yet. We would leave it in operating, but we would designate it for capital needs. The amount could fund capital maintenance after the completion of the master facility plan in 2032, or it could help pay for capital needs that weren't included in the master facility plan or referendum. And so I mentioned earlier looking into solar panels, that would have a pretty significant return on investment, a relatively short repayment plan. This could be a potential source for completing some solar projects on some of our newer roofs. This amount would also be available to provide additional liquidity until 2032 in case of funding delays or other revenue challenges. The $42 million is about 260 days of state funding, so it would represent a significant portion of our state funding if there were state funding challenges. And again, we could propose restricting this amount or a similar amount through board action with the adoption of the 25-26 budget. And then just looking at some other deferred needs we have where as administration we believe we could use this fund balance to really positively impact our operations, create some stability with the budget, and really most importantly, have a direct benefit to our students in the classroom. Again, we've had some previous reports to the board about some operational needs that have been deferred, such as curriculum adoptions, some technology needs. Again, these were things that when we had one-time expenditures or revenues in 2022 and 23, we prioritized getting caught up, and we're in better shape than we were 4 or 5 years ago, but we still have some deferred needs in those areas we'd like to address. Again, with transportation being a continued challenge, we've had some successful use transitioning some of our extracurricular uses to white buses. So this could be an opportunity to expand our white bus program, or at least provide funds to replace those buses as they come due as well. Again, the focus would be on one-time necessary purchases anticipated during the next 3 to 5 years. And again, we believe using these funds in an appropriate way could allow other operating funds to be used for recurring costs and help sort of stabilize some of those deficits we saw earlier. Similar to the capital money, we would propose the restriction through board action with the adoption of the 25-26 budget. And so with that, I am available for any questions. I will say we will continue to update the Board of Education throughout the spring. We will provide another budget update on May 5th, hopefully a little shorter than this evening's. We will continue to have to the board approval of referendum funded projects as well as a bond parameters resolution for our next bond issue, and that'll be done throughout the spring, including some significant approvals that were on the consent agenda this evening. June 16th, I'll say we're really excited about that date because that's when we're going to give our first referendum projects update for some of the work we've been planning for Niqua and Waubonsie. So that's circle that date on your calendar. That's going to be a pretty exciting night. And with that said, we will also be continuing to update our community on the process of our referendum projects at ipsd.org/saferstronger204.
All right. How about Mr. Karubas? Do you have any comments or questions?
You went an hour straight through 32 slides with
57
no drink until
57
now.
minutes.
Well, 57? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got it in under an hour.
These financial guys. Couple comments on the evidence-based funding. State increased funding by $350 million, and we get $500,000. So that's 0.1%. So it might sound like a great number for somebody to give a presentation at the state level. We increased funding by $350 million, but for this district, for our residents, it only calculates to $500,000. So I think that shows how the funding formula really isn't working for our district. I understand the motivation behind it, but we're not going to see significant benefit for many years. So that's a deficiency I'd like the state to correct, and I'm sure they're going to get right on that. The budget. So kind of page 5, page 6. Let's head to that. The overall gist of my comments on this is I think there's an opportunity to increase reporting and transparency when our expenditures exceed or are forecasted to exceed our budget, our actual budget. I know that the board kind of makes monthly approvals of the finances, and we do get some reporting about where each of the funds is at from a percentage standpoint. But we went, last year we went on, what page do you have up there?
This is last year's.
Yeah, so is that page 5?
Page 5, yes.
Yeah, so on page 5, we went $10 million over budget. Now, the board approved each of those payments over budget. But were we, fully transparent and reporting to both the board and the public about, how we got to that point? And I know we went through the exercise with officially amending the budget, and I'm not sure that process really is a transparent way to do it. It's a budget, and so I can appreciate that there's going to be pluses and minuses. But I think there's just a way from a reporting standpoint to say, we're going to go over the budget by $10 million, but we had $10 million in revenue. So look, on a $423 million budget, we only had a $22,000 deficit, which is very impressive. So I think there's some opportunities for us to increase transparency and reporting on a regular basis when we get out of line from our budget. And I think that's important because, policy dictates, and part of why we get approving the budget is that we stay within budget. So I'd like to see improvements on that, especially when you see on the next slide, it's starting to grow. And so still not a big variance, but we're forecasting a greater deficit. And this is only for, half the year. So what are we going to look like for the balance of the year? So it's a reporting thing. I don't have any concerns from we're doing anything or that's not above board. I just think we could be a little bit more transparent. Now the reserves. You mentioned, it's easy to shrink them and it's hard to grow them. It takes a little while for them to go back up. But if we're looking at, what slide is it? Yeah, let's see. a second. Yeah, let's go to slide 28. So the 25% is in policy, and that is for recognition. But at some level, so what? It's a percentage. The important part is this slide 8 to make sure we have enough money to make payroll, because that's one of our largest expenses. And, you know, I recall when the state was missing payments that we got down to a very low number where we had 16 million in reserves and a 20 mil plus payroll, and it was close. Your predecessor was sweating it a little bit. So now we have a little bit more cushion, this 82. And now we're considering talking about dropping it by 54. And so that'll bring us to now 38. And are we as a board, as a administration, kind of comfortable with that being enough of a cushion, kind of considering what's happening at the federal and state level as well? So we talking the 25%. You know, we don't get like extra money for being recognition, right? Like,
We do not.
you know, it sounds good. But the only real benefit of that percentage is to make sure that we make payroll at our lowest point. So that should be the focus for all of us, to make sure that whatever we do with reserves, pluses or minuses, that come May, nobody's having a problem. Now the bond structure on page 23. I look forward to kind of more discussions on this one. You know, we have authority to borrow 420. And then we're talking about possibly increasing the payments on it. And so there's kind of a little disconnect for me. You know, why are we why are we taking out a loan and then increasing payments? Is there a way to match that better? You know, if I'm going to borrow, pay interest, and then just pay it off quicker, maybe I don't borrow as much at the end of the day. You know, if our commitment was to keep it at 37%, and then we're proposing dropping it from 37% with increased payments. And, you know, as a taxpayer, that's very advantageous. But do we want to try to keep it at 37% just to remain flexible as well? So I kind of appreciate further discussions on how to structure this. I think in prior years for the building bonds, we kept it flat at 25 mil, or there was some fixed number. We were less concerned about the rate. Now this time, we're not looking at the left side as much as the right side of this graph. And then we see the blue line decrease, but maybe we want the blue line to remain flat. And that could be a combination of anticipating the EAV increase, not taking out 420 mil total. So I need some more help with that as we go forward. And you mentioned we don't have to figure it all out today. We don't have to figure it all. We have years of bond issuances where this can be tweaked. And who knows what's going to happen with EAVs. We're making assumptions. So, but I still think this is a slide we should see in the future as we do additional bonds and budgets. When we look at the non-recurring part of it, this helps us kind of think about the structure rather than taking it out at each of these bond issuance dates, where we'll take it out, you know, every 2 years or every year and a half. Maybe there's changes in the EAV or interest rates where we want to say the interest rates aren't favorable, or they are, and we want to do something different. So I would appreciate seeing this on a regular basis. So I know I barfed out a lot at you, but that's all I got.
11 minutes without taking a sip, so that's pretty good.
I ran out of drink.
Yeah, no, appreciate all the comments and some really good thoughts there. I'll just a couple things I just want to comment on real quick. I do agree. We're as a district and as a business office, we're always looking for continual improvement, and so there are definitely some opportunities to improve our financial reporting, both to the board and community. Again, that's part of our intention with our sort of Safer, Stronger 204 website as we continue to build that out. As the board knows, we've recently transitioned to a new financial reporting software, and so we are starting to really explore what we can do with that to improve financial reporting. And I think we'll have something pretty soon, but we will even put it higher on the priority list based on some of those comments. On the fund balance piece, I will point out, the concerns are definitely valid, and it's not a recommendation any of us make lightly when we talk about potentially reducing that fund balance percentage, because we know the importance of monitoring that and of ensuring that we do have the funds available to meet all obligations. And you're correct, the biggest obligation is our payroll, and it would be those sort of April and May payrolls that, there are other districts that take out a payday loan effectively to make those payments. But I'll point out part of what we've done as part of the recommendation is and just a reminder is that $42 million we're talking about for capital, that would be designated for expenditures after 2032. And so that is money that would stay in the operating fund for several years. Hopefully ride out this maybe period of unpredictability that we're seeing at sort of the state and federal level. And so it's really just, it would really be about the $12 million in operating payments that we would look to sort of in the short term over that next 3 to 5 year period. And with that said, our hope is to come back as part of future budgets with some really strategic uses for those funds that do have a positive impact for our students and in our classroom, but also put us in a more stable position moving forward with future operating budgets. And then just a final comment on the bond rate, because I think it is something that, as you talked, I probably should have mentioned earlier. You are correct. Prior structures really focused on keeping a level bond payment, but that was coming out of a period where we really had a significant bond rate or tax rate going towards bonds. So our 37-cent rate, sort of the rate we've committed to from the taxpayers, is the lowest bond rate this district has seen in many years. When we were kind of at the peak coming out of constructing Mattia, that rate was over 60 cents. So we've already brought that bond rate down fairly significantly. I would, definitely if as we work towards this and talk about future fundings, we can look at kind of benchmarking our debt service rate to some of our peer districts and some other districts. But I think you'd find where we are at 37 cents is at a pretty good place. 40 cents is kind of what, at least in my mind, I tend to see as sort of a reasonable rate. So, I feel like the recommendation to maintain that 37-cent rate or what was built into the referendum proposal is starting with a fairly sound, sustainable rate for our taxpayers. Okay, so
let me jump in there. There was a change in the law recently. I think you gave a presentation on where districts have an opportunity to take out bonds without approval for life safety type of stuff. That might be another factor in here where we don't just have 420 mil. Now we have an extra ability to borrow X amount of dollars. That might be something we want to put on the table for us to show some variability. And that might give us an opportunity to spend money in those years where we don't, you know, we need the capital improvement stuff done, but we don't want to borrow, you know, during the first 5 years of the issuance. And so the rate might decrease because we want to pay off the safer bonds, but we might still want to do the life safety bonds. And that might be where we maintain this 37%. So I think including that capacity just for awareness might help us.
Yeah, yes, that's a very good point, and thought I threw all I could at the group tonight, but that would be another variable that we can consider
I
as well.
blacked out at like slide 16.
Okay. Ms. Deming.
I just have a couple of questions. Thank you very much. Staying on slide 23, just so that 37 cents, though, that was a commitment that we made. So I want to make sure that the public knows there's not going to be any variance up on that. That's a commitment that we made. And then just real quickly, over to the left, it says structure can be reevaluated with each new issue and each refunding opportunity. So does that mean, I want to make sure I understand that, does that mean that with each new bond issue that we might look at seeing whether or not this needs to be reevaluated? And
yeah, absolutely. So first statement's absolutely correct. Nothing that we're showing tonight is showing a rate above 37 cents. So you know, we still feel comfortable that we can keep our projection with that rate. So the best way to explain it with this slide is I'd say right now we are locked in with the gray and the blue. And then we're going to come to the board in May or June, looking to kind of lock in what the green, what the sea green could look like. So that would be an opportunity to then add the green. And then in 2027, we'd potentially come to the board and try to lock in the purple. And so every time we're not locking in the full schedule, we're locking in little bits and pieces of it. And so that is an opportunity every couple years to evaluate where we are with both the project needs and what our progress is on the projects. It's a chance to evaluate the interest rate environment and what we see, what we expect to be available to us in the market. It's a chance to reevaluate where EAV is and property growth is in the district to see if that's meeting our expectations. And so, yes, it is an opportunity to evaluate portions of that chart each time those opportunities come up. And then we do have opportunities to restructure those bonds, usually at about 10 years. So we may have a little gap, but then sort of the process can repeat itself when we get a chance to, you know, potentially refund or restructure each of those issuances. And so that's that ideal sort of that gradual evaluation of each bond. And then, again, the last piece that Board Member Krubis threw in right at the end is if there is an opportunity to add some life safety pieces to that mix, that could be part of that discussion that's continually evaluated as well.
Slide 15, I just wanted to share with as much conversation and a little bit uncertainty right now regarding some of the conversations, the federal conversations that have been taking place. This was extremely beneficial just to help reinforce to us and especially the public what that percentage is from a federal funding standpoint that we receive. But the portion, and I sometimes forget this, so the comment regarding at the very end of that slide, but talking about the lunch program and the fact that there's a subsidization there for all children is really important. Can you what amount? Do you have any idea that you can share what either percentage or amount that is relates to what our cost is for our lunches? Just to sort of speak in general terms or back up a second again for everybody, we approximately 21% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and so they are receiving either a completely free meal or they're making a partial payment, and then that full amount is subsidized by
the federal government. We spoke earlier in the presentation. We do have several schools that are on what's known as the community-wide provision, or shortened to CEP. So there are students at those schools who don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, who do receive a fully subsidized free and reduced lunch. And then, again, to this comment, we do have students who pay for lunch every day and do not have free and reduced lunch status, but the federal government still gives us an additional subsidy for those lunches too, to keep them affordable, to ensure that we can meet some nutritional requirements on those lunches as well. Offhand, I'd be guessing a little bit at that number, but I think it's at least $1 per lunch, and we can follow up and get that exact amount.
Sorry,
but it is a significant percentage of that lunch payment. It's not a nickel or a dime or something. It is a significant dollar amount, and we'll follow up with the board. I'm sure Ron Johnson's one of the 12 people watching at home right now, and I may even start getting buzzed from it in a second. So yeah, we'll have those exact amounts to the board soon. But it would substantially impact that program. I mean, our school lunch program would look very different if anything changes with that program.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you that before.
I just want to add, we say lunch, but we also want to include breakfast.
Breakfast and snacks, yes, that's also true as well. And again, those school-wide programs, that's breakfast for all students as well as lunch.
Okay, and just a really, if you could remind us on slide 31, just remind us white bus transportation needs. Can you share what white bus white buses are used for, sort of that spectrum?
Yeah, great, really good question. So what we use our white bus program for various extracurricular activities. That can include some things during the school day, specifically for our STEPS program. They're using them to take students to job sites and other activities like that. Otherwise, our middle and high schools have a fleet of white buses they use for extracurricular activities. We have worked with our team. Again, one of the strategies we've used to sort of minimize our transportation expenses to get as many of our club sponsors and building leaders trained on how to drive a white bus, and it takes a little bit, but it's not nearly as intimidating as driving the full bus, right? But so that we're able to use those and use a 15-passenger van as opposed to a yellow bus, and using that full fleet, and so that has that does require that one-time capital purchase of that white bus, but once that's made, we're using our district employees who are already sponsoring the event to drive them. And so there is, again, a cost savings or a cost efficiency to that. And so, again, one of our proposed a proposal or a potential need that could fit a fund balance expenditure would be either expanding that program or at least making sure that we have the replacement funds available, because, again, that does save operating money in the long run.
And those are really my questions. And just echoing Board Member Karubas, I eagerly look forward to seeing that the focus on Tier 2 and just right away. I know that is something that is so critically urgent to everybody. But from a serious comment, anything that you feel as we continue to move forward, advocacy that we can help in that arena, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Okay. Yeah, we do continue to have good legislative partners. The message about EBF and specifically the challenges we have as a Tier 2 district, I think is being received by some, and we continue to work to drive that message home. So I do appreciate the board's support on that as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Guntz.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I know that there was so much you had to talk about with the what ifs when it comes to funding, especially federal. So thank you, and it was impressive talking absolutely nonstop. I will not hit the 11 minutes that Justin did either. But I just wanted to honestly talk a little bit more on slide 17. When we're talking about the thank you. The reduction in staffing, just to make sure I'm understanding what we're saying. So we're talking possibly for next year, a reduction in 19 FTEs. But the 28 reductions, would that be part of that, or would that be additional?
Yeah, so it would be, we'd have 9 new positions for next year, 28 positions reduced, and that would be a net of 19.
Okay. So and I just want to say absolutely the 9 additional positions, I think we can all agree, especially after seeing that ELL presentation, just how absolutely essential they are. So that is absolutely wonderful. The 5% proposed increase in registration, would that help address or lessen the need to reduce by that many FTEs, or would it address other issues?
Our recommendation would be for 5%, and that's kind of built into the rest of the proposal. So a larger increase would maybe
help offset
that. But
okay.
Again, we sort of started with 5%, and I think this may be an area that as we work to improve sort of process and also improve transparency, maybe we look at tying that to, well, it is already tied to specific expenditures, primarily the student's Chromebook and some other consumables. But that is an area where we could improve transparency for the community about what that's tied to, and then be intentional about keeping that ratio or percentage that's offsetting going forward. So that would be something, or is something we're looking at going forward, so that hopefully, again, we're increasing just our communication with our board and our community into the rationale for some of those fees.
No, I think that's excellent. Thank you so much. And I know none of these decisions are easy. I think that was pretty much all of my questions. And I do want to just reiterate, I really do look forward to continuing conversations, because there are so many uncertainties and unknown factors that I know all these numbers can change to in an instant. So thank you again.
Ms. Bostic.
Okay, I just want to clarify something, partially for myself, but partially for community members who might be in a similar position. If we're going back, so I'm understanding, to slide 5 and 6. So for slide 5 was our budget last year, the overage of $22,000, which I did have some calculation help on this, is 5/10,000ths of a percentage difference between the proposed budget and the actual expenditure, correct?
It's a very small percentage.
5/10,000ths. Yes. Okay, I'm just clarifying. And then you said, going forward, looking forward, on slide 8, with the projected budgets going forward, we see some greater increases. So for fiscal year 2027, the difference between the expenditures and the deficit is 0.39%.
Yes, that sounds
Okay.
correct.
So still less than half a percentage difference between what we budget and what we propose to spend, or may end up spending. So my real question here is, what level of budget variance triggers reductions in staff or costs? Because when I look at those actual percentages, they seem absurdly low and really impressively very close to on budget. But with a budget as large as ours is, it ends up being real money.
Yes.
Real dollars, even though the percentage is so incredibly low. So what typical, and I'm sorry I didn't have this question for you ahead of time, hearing you, it's very different for me to read through this on my own and to have you explain it to me. So in a perfect world, I would have had this question for you well in advance, but it's coming to me now.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a good question, and I think the message to the community it would be, it is a relatively small deficit we're looking at. But we are being proactive in addressing it because we don't want to see it, we don't want to get to a point where it is a significant deficit. And the challenge is that not just school districts, not just governments, but any organization that see a small deficit and kind of say, well, it's just 1 year. A lot of times that's maybe it's just 1 year, but then it grows slightly over time. And so what I would say is it's a combination of things. It's the amount of the deficit, but it's also how that projects or forecasts out. Okay. And that's what we're showing here is that it's not just 1 year, but it's fiscal year 27 on. Okay. So it's a trend we're seeing as again, as some revenues are kind of primary revenues tied to CPI, and we have expenditures that are increasing above CPI. We have other revenues that are flat, that have some predictability concerns, and to the extent that we have expenditures that are rising at or below CPI, that still creates a challenge in that environment. So it's the combination of, I'd say, both the amount as well as how that projects out over a longer term time horizon. And that's why sort of when we start this process, we start with a 5-year forecast. And again, even when we get into the non-operating, we try and go out as far as possible because we want to see not just what the impact is on next year, but we want to see how that projects out over time. So I will say with the deficits we're showing now, again, relatively small compared to total revenue, but they do need to be addressed. But because of the size of them, it does create an opportunity where we can look at fund balance. We could look at how we structure some expenditures, how we again maybe use some one-time dollars to create longer term savings. This is the time to address this because we still have a lot of options on the table. Whereas if we waited a year or two or 3 or 4, we could get to a situation where we don't have as many options. So that would be my that would kind of be my general response. And again, to emphasize, our administrative team has been looking at these trends, even as some numbers kind of ebb and flow and change. We've been looking at these trends since last spring to some extent. To really ensure that as we address them, we're again putting all the options on the table. To the extent reductions are necessary, we are being specific and very conscientious of where those reductions are, as opposed to again how things are maybe being done at other levels of government right now. And then again thinking about what some of those other opportunities could be. So okay. I hope that.
Thank you. Yes, that helps quite a bit. Is it fair to summarize that and say we're being exceptionally responsible stewards of our taxpayers' money by making sure that even a small difference doesn't snowball into something in the future?
I think that's fair, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Jane.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to slide 15. Because again, like Board Member Deming stated, I really appreciated both at the state level and at the federal level your insights on an explanation on how our district might be impacted by various changes. I was wondering if you could take a moment to explain the difference between the statutory distribution, or how that what we get through the education under statutory versus discretionary, like what programs does that support?
Yeah, so really in breaking out what we mentioned earlier, there are some programs that are that predate the Department of Education. The primary ones are the title funding, so Title I, which is allocated by poverty count for a district. Title II, III, and IV, which are smaller portions, but also sources of funding tied for teacher professional development, EL students, and then as well. those fund a very small portion of the total services or total expenses we're doing in those areas, but that's the intention of those funding. And then also IDEA funding, so funding for students with for special education needs. Again, a relatively small portion of the total expense we're spending in that area, but it is tied to those. So, you know, again, a lot of this is sort of you know, new to all of us, but the interpretation is that even if the Department of Education was dissolved or by an act of Congress, those funding sources would still exist and legally just be transferred to a different department. And again, there was a time when there wasn't a Department of Education, and those were administered through the Department of Health and Human Services or the Justice Department or other departments. So that's what we're kind of considering to be statutorily required funding. Again, for this current year, we have a very small portion of discretionary funding. There's been years where we've had more programs, some of the ESSER programs that were discretionary, and we had those, you know, that would have been a slightly larger share of the pie. But, you know, the substantial portion of that federal budget is tied to those specific programs.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. The other question I had was on slide 18 regarding transportation. And although you described so beautifully all of the things that our district has been doing to try to lower that cost, despite the looks like exponentially growing rate here, I'm concerned about what this line looks like 5 years from now. And despite our efforts, I'm wondering if there's been discussions around, I don't know, long-term planning around transportation in general. Just a thought, not anything that I'm expecting any specific answer to, but just how this direction is just concerning, and also there doesn't seem to be any reason that this, or there's not good reasoning behind this line changing. If the reason for it is, you know, the driving costs, like you mentioned, you know, just cost of the drivers, fuel costs, and things of that nature, and then our inability to purchase these buses like other districts are able to do. I was just curious what your thoughts were around that.
We are also concerned with the trend. We are working, you know, we're working, I would say, around the clock to try and address that. But you're correct. The big, you know, some of the big concerns or big issues are still going to be out there. You know, 2019 is sort of a good starting point for this. I think where we saw a shift or where we've seen the shift specifically on driver wages is really as we saw an increase in Amazon and sort of home delivery, other just changing consumer patterns, which really put some of those jobs in high demand.
Right.
Again, our bus drivers are actually more certified than a Amazon delivery driver,
Yeah.
and packages don't misbehave as much as sometimes students on a bus do. So,
yeah.
You know, and the reality is we've seen individuals who have trained to be bus drivers and spend a couple months with us and then transition into to one of those sort of careers after we've, you know, potentially helped pay for some of their licensing and training and things like that. So, you know, that's a challenge that hopefully is just past us. But you know, I don't see a world where that Amazon delivery or those challenges are going away. But hopefully, at least it's started to sort of be built into the model a little bit. You know, we do again, some things we're trying that are maybe statewide initiatives, and Dr. Talley has been more involved than I, but, working on some of those licensing requirements, we can, trying to get that school bus driver license maybe a little easier to obtain, and maybe not as much a direct competition to some of those other delivery services. So trying to create collaboratively at a state level to again really educate our legislators on what the challenges are, and also work with other districts to think of some solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely, it's definitely a concern for us as well.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Rising.
Yay. Slide 6, please. Any concern, I mean, you had brought up revenues trending above budget with the interest income and interest rates. Is there any concern about that, like long-term going forward, or any ways that could impact us, or does it kind of all even itself out, or?
Well, I'd say there are concerns. We have budgeted for reductions in interest income moving forward, kind of gradual decreases, so that some of that's built into the budget, but definitely if there are decreases that are not in line with what we budgeted and what's kind of currently being projected, that would be a challenge. Just sort of the raw numbers on interest income. Again, most of our funds are invested on the short-term side of the curve. What they would call a 25 basis point reduction in the interest rate, which is kind of the standard federal rate cut, is about $500,000 for our district. So the Fed meets 7 times a year, and that's 7 times a year they have a potential to cost us $500,000. And when interest rates were increasing, the opposite was true. Every time they met, we were putting $500,000 in our bank accounts potentially. Yeah. So, that there is a significant risk tied to being so on the short end of the interest rate curve. A comment just about, again, as we look at our fund balance policy, that could be another potential benefit of that, is if we do restrict some fund balance for longer term capital needs, we could also look at investing those funds out a little bit longer, maybe getting a little bit more protection against some of that interest rate risk.
And then going back to what Mr. Karubas said about maybe posting monthly updates on budget and stuff like that. And again, this doesn't come down to myself not trusting the work you do or administration does with our budget, because we all kind of come out even at the end of the day, even when you look at last year's compared to this year's. This year, obviously, we did are trending a little better, but I think it's important for the community to know. Listen, look at our purchase services that we constantly go back and try to rebid these contracts and get lower rates. And the reality is, going back to Ms. Fostick's thing, is the revenue that's coming in from property taxes and CPI and state and federal is not keeping up with the expenditures that are far exceeding CPI, like you discussed, and it continuously gets harder and harder to keep up, especially on that purchase service side, on the expenditure side. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, that purchase services is also transportation, right?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
So now go to slide 13. What's very frustrating about this to me, and I will call out all transportation vendors equally, is that rightfully so, I understand coming out of COVID that they had struggles. They had struggles getting drivers, they needed to raise driver rates. But the interesting thing about that, if you look at the categorical proration rates, that also went up from the state. So transportation vendors raised their rates significantly on school districts. The state paid a lot more on proration percentages. And now the proration percentages are bottoming out, and we're still paying the same amount of money that we were paying on transportation actually probably more than we were in 2022. And oh, by the way, transportation vendors are making record profit margins, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. I'm very concerned about this. I'm very concerned where this money is going to come from, because I think we're going to continuously see that purchase service expenditure be out of balance. And this is kind of where us being a tier 2 really starts to impact us. Where tier 1s are building new buildings and, you know, getting some of the things, and rightfully so, that those tier 1 districts have been missing. But it's hurting us because we're having to defer other revenue back into purchase services. If you go to slide 8, regarding fund balances, I won't get into, well, maybe I will. Regarding fund balances, if I'm looking and projecting this out and looking at fund balances, I understand we're at 39% right now, and I'm not disagreeing with any of the things that you discussed about, you know, looking at future capital and operating support with some of the excess fund balances we have. But looking at the fund balances projecting out, that also concerns me to take that much money out of fund balances when it's projecting lower 5-6 years out. So any comment you want to make there?
I think that it is something that it is a recommendation or idea we bring forward with a lot of thought, and we recognize it's a serious recommendation for administration and the board to consider. I think again, one other piece that I'll add that we haven't mentioned in the previous hour and 45 minutes here is, you know, to maintain that 25% balance does require a small amount of surplus each year to kind of keep the 25% as revenues go up. So one of the challenges is when you're recommending a reduction or a deficit spending, you're kind of, it's not just the amount of the deficit you're decreasing it, but you're also passing on the amount you would traditionally be adding. And so a $2 million deficit really is closer to a $4 million deficit towards that 25%, for example. So that is something that we're aware of and we'll consider as we refine that proposal. Again, some of that $12 million amount we'd be recommending, the goal would be to try and find things that will reduce operating expenses in the future. So prioritize things that are, you know, that have a payback to them. Again, to hopefully stabilize it so that it's maybe a year or two of deficit spending followed by a stable amount or a small surplus.
Then just 2 quick more comments. Slide 11, property tax rate. Thank you for bringing that up, that we continue to lower the rate, but if people are seeing an increase in their property taxes, that is because it's a shifting of commercial versus residential. And when there's less commercial, residential takes on more of the burden. So even though we're lowering the rate, people's taxes could still go up. Thank you for mentioning that. Slide 15 on the Department of Ed funding. I'm not going to overstress about this because we're going to have plenty of heads up time if any reductions are made. But what does have me most concerned is the Individuals with Disability Ed Act and the Title I, because that is hurting our most vulnerable kids if they cut into that. But again, we will have plenty of time to plan for that should that happen. I'm not going to worry about what ifs. And then just finally, I do have a lot more comments about some of the future capital that you brought up in the operating with the fund balances, but I'll just send those in and ask those questions to you. Because I know that's a recommendation and we're still discussing it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for everyone for all the comments. And it was a lengthy discussion and presentation, but I thought they were all excellent points and questions. I do appreciate us. We've always had not only a short-term focus, but a long-term focus. And I appreciate that that continues to be our way of operating. And so when you're looking at what are we going to do for capital expenses, like out beyond 2032, it is a concern. We're in a happiness mode. We got a lot of capital money available to us, but we don't want to go back to where we were before, where we were spending, what, $3 million on maintenance in our buildings and things. So it's like we need to figure out what we can do to address that. So I do appreciate that. I find that when I'm listening to these presentations, and I'm much more of a worrywart than I thought. Like usually I'm a very positive speaker or whatever, but I guess lately I worry about a lot of funding things with public schools. And so when you are projecting 2% CPI and 2.5% CPI, is that comfortable? I mean, it seems like we might have years like we had before where all of a sudden CPI just jacks way up, and it's like I see that being projected out, and it seems.
Yeah, I think again, I probably hopefully people think I'm a positive, happy person, but I like you. I worry about these things too. Yeah, I think that just speaks to the importance of ensuring we're managing expenditures towards that CPI number as well. So. If CPI does increase, that would mean an increase in revenues potentially, but it also means a potential increase in expenditures. And so making sure that we keep those aligned, and again, making sure that we we have a sort of structural balanced budget, I think is important to protect us regardless of what CPI does. Yeah, the biggest risk to us would be a number above 5%, because then we do get hit with the cap, but do see some expenditures go above the cap if that happens. So that would be the biggest risk. We're not, at least right now, it doesn't seem like that's the concern. It does sound there's some concern that inflation's ticking back up, but we're not seeing concerns about it going above 5% yet. But that would be the amount that I think we really have to worry about.
I just, I go back to slide 5, which several people brought up and looked at. It is fantastic that we had a budget that ended up $22,000, within our, but we did have significant overages and underspending to get to that point. And I think that was brought up as where they see a concern, like maybe we should have more information when something like that's trending that way. I also know that you also have to be careful, because sometimes you have an expense that is front loaded and you can't straight line it for the rest of the year and say that's what it's going to cost, but it's so it's something that I think is interesting to the board, but I think we have to be careful about how we present that also, because it's not always a straight line.
Yeah, again, I think there were some really good comments on that. Again, I think one of the good pieces about last year is that it was sort of intentional and tied to some specific revenue sources where those overages were. So again, part of the reason that purchase services is over is because we sold more school meals, but that also ties directly to a revenue number. So definitely some good comments about transparency, and again, we'll continue to work on that communication level. But at least as we look to last year, there was some pretty there's a pretty direct correlation between those increase in revenues and the expenses.
On page 8, again brought up by several, it's like the deficit worries me, and how do you make that not be read, and because we don't have a lot of funding to make up for something like that, and there's no magic pot in the sky that's going to come to us. So I worry about the state and federal level of funding that we're gonna get. And I know we had a comment earlier about, well, it's probably gonna just transfer to another department at the federal level if something happens, which could be. But I also see a lot of talk in the news about voucher programs and reducing, and nobody's gonna give education a lot more money at the federal or state level. I mean, it's not gonna be like magic happy day. And if they wanna do something with vouchers at either state or federal, I think state has been kind of squashed a bit though, that by definition would take money, in my mind, from public education, and it would have to come from something that already is there, because they're not gonna bump up. That's my opinion, but, so I worry about that. So I hope things would just transfer if something happens, but it could be that it also could be reduced. And I think things like IDEA funding is vastly underfunded right now to support the needs of the kids. So any change there would be very dramatic for us to absorb. So the other thing I wanted to just, I know we had recently a report on headcount in the district, because that also is impactful on our budget, right? So our headcount trends, I mean, we're kind of stable, right?
Yes, they are.
And so I think it's important for our community to know that, because sometimes there's comments like, oh, your headcount's like dropping or whatever, but we just recently had some information and it was pretty flat, actually.
So when we were doing our multiple meetings about the bond referendum, the issue of our enrollment came up many times. And we said then, as we will say now, our enrollment is relatively stable now. We have seen a decrease, we saw a decrease over the last several years, from a high of 30,000 to now where we are about 26,000. And so we stay where we are, and we should be in that area for the next several years is what we think will happen. And the last report that came out supports that.
Right, and so that trend actually is impactful in our budget forecasts and calculations too, and how many,
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't have a real direct impact just because of how the state funding formula works and things. But it is an indirect impact. Again, we do receive new property allocations for students that are coming from new property developments. I think this does tie to your comment a little bit about vouchers too, that I'm confident in this district and the strength of this district that our enrollment will be stable even if there is a voucher program offered. But that doesn't mean that there's not an indirect impact somewhere. Right. But overall, the reality is there are some demographic challenges at the national and state level that are kind of keeping K-12 enrollment declining, but we're a destination district. People want to come here. I think people will continue to want to come here, and we're projecting fairly stable enrollment moving forward.
Yeah, so I appreciate the discussion about the fund balance. I think more discussion will continue. It is something I see why it would be beneficial, but I also have concerns about what we would do with that. So thank you very much for the information. It's a lot of thoughtfulness behind this, and we are careful stewards of our funding that we get from all the sources, and I also think that we absolutely have to keep our 0.37 commitment to that bond referendum. That's our word, and for sure I'm a very strong believer in that has to maintain. Yeah. So. All right.
I just want to, I know we are way over time, but I want to go to slide 30, please. I'm sorry? Okay. There was a lot discussed tonight, but about the fund balance. I want people to look at bullet number 3. Amount would provide additional liquidity in case of state funding delays or other revenue challenges. And so I just want to reiterate this. Mr. Shipley has talked about how careful and thoughtful, and I'm going to say he is a very conservative approach to funding, and which I appreciate. But this also speaks to people's concerns about what might occur with the budget. So I just want to reiterate this because I think it may have been lost in what people were thinking with regards to spending down the fund balance. That you still have the liquidity of 260 days of funding that would be available for us. Operating funds would allow us to take care of some one-time needs that we have to have. Things such as technology equipment for our middle and high schools, and some other things such as other services that we need to have. So I just want to say that, and that's it.
Thank you.
All right, I think
Appreciate
we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any legislative advocacy or Board of Education update items? No.
I just wanted to very quickly remind whoever is still watching, all 5 of you, about the coffee and conversation coming up on Wednesday night at Springbrook Elementary at 7 p.m., where Dr. Talley, Mr. Karubis, and myself will be to answer questions, concerns, chat.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's a great opportunity for everyone to have those conversations in a small group with some of the people making decisions in the district. So thank you. All right, I need a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't